The wind swept across the vast Antarctic plains, a relentless, ghostly force that carried with it a silence so deep it seemed almost alive. Snowflakes danced in the air, illuminated by the pale, muted glow of a distant sun that barely penetrated the endless white horizon. The land stretched on endlessly, an ocean of ice and frost, broken only by jagged mountains that rose like forgotten sentinels guarding secrets no human had yet dared fully uncover. Here, at the bottom of the world, time itself seemed to slow, frozen in the grip of eternal winter. It was a place where nature demanded reverence, where every step into its barren expanse felt like trespassing into a realm meant to remain untouched. For centuries, this continent remained hidden from the eyes of explorers, cloaked in myth and rumor. Sailors whispered of lands so far south that the seas turned into a labyrinth of ice, where the sun barely rose for months, and night fell with a permanence that seemed unnatural. Legends told of civilizations lost to the cold, of strange artifacts buried beneath glaciers, of mysteries that defied reason. And then there were the stories that spoke of something even stranger, something that hinted at human presence far older and more secret than any known history dared acknowledge. Among the frozen desolation, some believed, lay the remnants of one of the most powerful and enigmatic orders in history, the Knights Templar. The Templars, knights bound by faith and secrecy, had vanished from the world centuries ago, their sudden disappearance shrouded in betrayal and blood. One moment they commanded armies and guarded treasures of unimaginable wealth. The next they were hunted, accused of heresy, and erased from official memory. Yet whispers persisted, rumors of a surviving faction that carried with them secrets so dangerous that their mere existence had to be hidden from the world. Some legends suggested that in the aftermath of their fall, these survivors had fled not just to distant lands but to the ends of the earth, to places so remote that no ruler, no army, no inquisitor could follow. Could Antarctica have been such a refuge? Could the Templars, known for their cunning and foresight, have journeyed into the frozen unknown to safeguard a legacy that would otherwise be lost forever? The wind carried more than cold. It carried echoes, faint yet persistent, as if the land itself remembered footsteps that had not been taken for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. Explorers who had dared to venture into these regions spoke of feelings that could not be explained. An unshakable sense of being watched, a presence lingering just beyond the edge of perception. Some dismissed it as imagination, a trick of isolation and exhaustion, yet others swore the ice itself concealed something alive, some remnant of a civilization or a secret that refused to die. Every jagged crevasse seemed to hide a story. Every frozen plateau whispered of vanished hands that had touched it long ago. In such a place, history was not just recorded. It was etched into the very fabric of the land. The first explorers of the Antarctic South were drawn by curiosity and ambition, unaware that they were treading ground that may have been marked centuries before by eyes very different from their own. Their journals described the harshness of the environment, the struggle to survive, but they also noted anomalies. Stones arranged in patterns that seemed deliberate, tunnels carved into glaciers, objects partially encased in ice that hinted at human craft. The world of ice was harsh and unforgiving, yet beneath its frozen surface lay the possibility of stories long buried, narratives that the world above had forgotten. Among these potential narratives, one stood out, shimmering faintly at the edges of imagination. The notion that the Templars, with all their secrecy and wealth, had chosen this desolate land as the final sanctuary for their most sacred and dangerous treasures. What those treasures might have been remains a question that ignites both curiosity and fear. Some whispered of relics of immense religious significance, objects that held a power beyond understanding, perhaps even knowledge forbidden to ordinary men. Others spoke of maps, encoded manuscripts, and symbols that contained secrets of navigation, astronomy, or technologies lost to history. If such things existed, Antarctica's vast glaciers would have been the perfect hiding place, an eternal vault, impenetrable, silent, and ruthless in its ability to preserve. Time would be the only custodian, and the ice its guardian, sealing away the whispers of a vanished order until someone brave or foolish enough dared to seek them. Imagine standing on a plateau of ice so vast it seems endless, the sky above pale and featureless, the horizon blurred into infinity. There is no sound but the wind and the crunch of snow beneath your feet. Yet in that silence, there is something else. A pulse, faint yet undeniable, a feeling that this place remembers, that it has witnessed more than human eyes are meant to see. For those who believe in the Frozen Templar Mystery, Antarctica is more than a land of ice. It is a living archive, a mausoleum of secrets, and a monument to human courage, faith, and obsession. Every ridge, every crevasse, every hidden cave could hold a fragment of a story that would rewrite what we know about history and the men who dared to challenge the world itself. The very idea of such a secret evokes a profound emotional resonance. There is fear of the unknown, of forces beyond comprehension, of truths too immense for the human mind to bear. There is awe, the realization that humans, driven by faith or ambition, may have traversed distances and endured hardships that would be unimaginable today. And there is wonder, a quiet, persistent wonder at the idea that beneath layers of ice and snow, a story waits, patient and immutable, longing to be found. It is a mystery that transcends time, one that calls not just to the historian or the adventurer but to the part of the human soul that is drawn to what lies just beyond our reach. And yet, despite the allure, there is a subtle warning in the Antarctic wind. The continent is not forgiving. It does not bend to human desire or ambition. It is a place where nature reigns supreme, where every discovery comes at a cost, where every step forward demands respect and resilience. For those who might seek the Frozen Templar secret, the path is treacherous not just because of the ice but because of the very weight of history and legend pressing down upon them. The question is not just whether the secrets exist, but whether they are meant to be found, and whether humanity is ready to confront what might lie beneath. As the sun dips low, casting long, distorted shadows across the glacial plains, one cannot help but feel a profound connection to those who may have come before. The Templars, if the legends are true, might have walked these lands long ago, leaving behind traces of faith, knowledge, and ambition carved not into stone, but into ice. And as the cold deepens and night encroaches, one is left with a singular, haunting thought: the ice remembers. Every flake, every crystal, every frozen breath of wind carries with it the whispers of a mystery that refuses to fade, a story waiting patiently for the day when the world is ready to listen. And so, in the frozen silence of Antarctica, the stage is set. The wind howls across the endless white, a reminder of the vastness of time and space, of secrets buried beyond reach, and of the possibility that, somewhere beneath the ice, the legacy of the Templars lies waiting, frozen but not forgotten, ready to reveal itself to the world that dares to seek it. Long before the icy desolation of Antarctica was ever imagined as a sanctuary for secrets, the Knights Templar carved their presence across Europe and the Holy Land with a combination of devotion, strategy, and an air of mystery that few could rival. They were men of faith, sworn to protect pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem, yet beneath their austere robes and vows of poverty lay an order of unparalleled wealth and influence. Castles and fortresses dotted the landscape, their banners flying proudly above stone walls that had withstood sieges and storms. They were guardians, warriors, and, most intriguingly, keepers of knowledge that seemed to stretch far beyond the reach of ordinary men. To the outside world, they were paragons of devotion. To those who glimpsed their inner workings, they were something far more complex, an organization that balanced faith, power, and secrets in a delicate, almost dangerous equilibrium. The beginnings of the Templars were humble, born from a small group of knights who pledged themselves to the protection of pilgrims in the Holy Land. Their mission was simple yet perilous: traverse hostile lands, escort vulnerable travelers, and uphold a code of conduct that blended martial skill with spiritual rigor. Yet even in those earliest days, hints of something extraordinary were present. They were meticulous record keepers, mapping the lands they traversed with precision few could match, and they collected artifacts and texts with a reverence that bordered on obsession. Each relic, each scroll, each symbol was preserved with care, as though the order sensed that the world might one day demand answers only they could provide. As the Templars grew in prominence, so too did their reputation for wealth and mystery. Donations flowed in from monarchs and nobles, not just in gold or silver, but in lands, estates, and priceless artifacts. Entire economies were touched by their influence. They became bankers, advisors, and secret keepers, their names whispered in courts and cloisters alike. But it was not mere ambition that drove them. There was an almost palpable sense that they were guardians of something profound, something that had to be protected from the prying eyes of kings, priests, and rivals. Whatever this secret was, it demanded discretion, cunning, and an unwavering dedication to the Order's hidden mission. Their fortresses reflected the duality of their existence. Imposing yet mysterious, functional yet symbolic. Towers rose into the sky like fingers pointing toward heaven, yet every wall, every corridor, seemed designed to conceal more than it revealed. Hidden chambers, vaults, and passageways were scattered throughout their strongholds, many of which remain undiscovered even today. Some historians suggest that these spaces were more than storage. They were repositories of knowledge, perhaps even instruments of learning, alchemy, or esoteric practice. To step inside one of these fortresses was to step into a world where faith and intellect intertwined, a world where nothing was ever truly as it seemed. Yet for all their power and influence, the Templars were not immune to envy and suspicion. Rumors of secret rituals, forbidden knowledge, and hidden treasures circulated like wildfire. Monarchs, threatened by the Order's autonomy and wealth, began to see them as rivals rather than allies. Accusations of heresy, blasphemy, and dark practices took root, often without evidence but with devastating effect. The Order's enemies sought not just to diminish their power but to erase their very existence from memory. And while much of this is familiar to history, it is the shadows, the things left unspoken, the documents that never survived, the testimonies never recorded, that hold the key to understanding why the Templars might have looked far beyond Europe, to lands untouched and unclaimed, as a haven for their most dangerous secrets. Their influence was not merely political or military. It extended into the spiritual and the intellectual. The Templars were known to study ancient texts, learn from scholars, and gather knowledge from distant lands. They explored architecture, mathematics, astronomy, and even early forms of engineering with a precision that was centuries ahead of their time. Some suggest that they may have had access to sources lost to modern scholarship, manuscripts, artifacts, or oral teachings that conveyed understanding of the world in ways no ordinary European of the era could comprehend. This intellectual curiosity, combined with their martial discipline, made them both formidable and enigmatic. To the outside observer, they were knights. To those who glimpsed the inner sanctum of their order, they were keepers of a profound, almost dangerous wisdom. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of their story is the paradox of their existence. Knights bound by sacred vows, yet wielders of immense secular power. Guardians of faith, yet seekers of hidden truths that may have challenged the very dogma they were sworn to protect. Their lives were governed by ritual, discipline, and devotion. Yet beneath this strict exterior lay an undercurrent of ambition and curiosity that propelled them to explore beyond the known. They were, in a sense, pioneers not only of land and battle but of knowledge and possibility. It is this duality that has fascinated historians, scholars, and storytellers for centuries, fueling the enduring allure of the Order and its mysteries. As their influence grew, so did the scale and ambition of their operations. They managed resources across continents, lent to kings and merchants alike, and established networks that spanned from the heart of Europe to the shores of the Levant. Every expedition, every campaign, every journey carried with it the possibility of discovery. Maps, relics, or knowledge too sensitive to be shared openly. And it is precisely this combination of reach, secrecy, and foresight that raises the tantalizing possibility that some Templars, facing threats of betrayal and annihilation, might have set their sights on lands so distant that history has barely dared to imagine them. Lands blank on the maps of their contemporaries. Lands that could serve as the ultimate sanctuary for what could not survive in the known world. Their stories were often cloaked in symbolism, their actions deliberately obscure. A knight traveling under the guise of a pilgrim, a ship dispatched with no clear destination, a document coded in symbols only understood by a select few, all suggest a world in which the Templars operated on multiple levels simultaneously. Publicly, they were knights, protectors of Christendom. Privately, They were seekers, preservers, and perhaps even experimenters with knowledge that could not be trusted to the masses. This dual existence, hidden in plain sight, allowed them to achieve extraordinary feats and, for a time, to shape the course of history. But it also sowed the seeds of suspicion, envy, and ultimately catastrophe. It is this complex tapestry of faith, power, secrecy, and curiosity that makes the Templars so compelling to this day. They were men driven by purpose, yet constantly balancing on the knife's edge between devotion and ambition, between loyalty and survival. And it is this same balance that may have led some to seek refuge in places untouched by human hand. If their wealth, knowledge, and sacred objects could not remain safe in Europe, where could they go? The answer, some theorists suggest, lies far to the south, in lands where the ice and wind themselves could guard the secrets too dangerous to exist anywhere else. To imagine the Templars in this way is to confront a paradox. A medieval order capable of immense violence and devotion, yet also capable of foresight and subtlety that seems almost modern in its sophistication. Their castles and fortresses were not only physical defenses but symbols of an order that understood the power of perception, of rumor, and of secrecy itself. And in imagining these knights at the edge of the known world, carrying with them treasures and knowledge no one else could protect, one begins to see why the frozen expanses of Antarctica might hold a fascination that transcends mere curiosity. It becomes more than a land of ice. It becomes a potential repository of human ambition, devotion, and the enduring desire to safeguard what we hold most sacred, even if the world itself turns against us. The story of the Templars is, at its heart, a story of contrasts. Power and humility, secrecy and revelation, faith and ambition. To follow their journey is to peer into the soul of an order that sought not just to survive but to endure, not just to protect but to preserve. And as we consider the icy deserts far to the south, we cannot help but wonder, if any order could master the art of concealment, could any place in the world serve as the perfect vault for their most dangerous secrets? Antarctica, silent and eternal, might just be that place, waiting, as always, for those brave enough to uncover what lies beneath. The night the Templars fell was a night drenched in betrayal, fear, and the quiet desperation of men who had once held the power of kings and the trust of saints. Europe had grown wary of their influence, uncomfortable with a group that could command armies, lend vast sums of gold, and operate across borders with almost unchallengeable authority. They had become too visible, too influential, and in the eyes of some rulers, too dangerous. What had begun as admiration had transformed into suspicion, and suspicion had metastasized into fear. And so, what had been a celebrated order, respected and revered, became a target of unparalleled cunning and ruthlessness. On the evening of October 13, 1307, the shadows of betrayal crept across France. The king, Philip IV, often called Philip the Fair, had spent months plotting, consulting advisors, interrogating allies, and crafting a strategy that would dismantle the Templars not with open war but with calculated subterfuge. He had long been indebted to the order, both financially and politically, yet he coveted their wealth, their secrets, and their unquestionable loyalty. By orchestrating a synchronized arrest, he sought not merely to imprison knights but to erase their influence entirely. It was a masterstroke of political theater, executed with precision, yet underneath it lay a cruelty so cold it mirrored the distant glaciers we will later consider. Methodical, implacable, and inexorably final. Templar strongholds, normally secure and bristling with vigilance, were breached not by siege but by treachery. The knights were rounded up in the dead of night, many dragged from their beds without warning. Torches flickered against stone walls, illuminating the faces of men caught unawares, their eyes wide with confusion and disbelief. There was no time to mount a defense. Even the most battle-hardened warriors were prisoners in the grip of a system designed to obliterate them. Those who had fought in the Holy Land, who had faced sword and arrow with unwavering courage, now faced something far more insidious. The machinery of politics turned into a weapon of total annihilation. The charges leveled against them were extraordinary in their ambition to shame and destroy. Heresy, blasphemy, idolatry, and occult practices were whispered in courts and chapels alike. Some were accused of denying Christ, worshipping false idols, or performing rites in secret. The allegations were sensational, designed to shock the public, to create the impression that this order, once noble, had become corrupt, dangerous, and inhuman. Yet those who knew the Templars intimately understood the paradox. Men of piety and discipline were now being painted as sinners and conspirators. Truth and falsehood became indistinguishable, and the very nature of secrecy, once their shield, now became their condemnation. Interrogations were brutal, psychological as well as physical. Knights were pressured to confess crimes they had not committed, tortured into admissions that satisfied the court while concealing the reality of their loyalty and their purpose. Some confessed, broken under the weight of pain and fear. Others remained silent, defiant even as their bodies betrayed them. Across Europe, whispers circulated of heroic stoicism and tragic despair, of men whose faith remained unbroken even as their world crumbled. The human element, the courage, the fear, the raw vulnerability, was perhaps the most profound aspect of their fall. It was not merely an end of power. It was an intimate, soul-deep collapse, one that reverberated far beyond the walls of Paris and the chambers of kings. The Templar treasures, gold, sacred relics, coded manuscripts, were seized with ruthless efficiency. Some items disappeared into royal vaults. Others were rumored to have been hidden, spirited away before the king's men could reach them. It is here, in these vanishing acts, that the seeds of enduring mystery were planted. If any men could think, plan, and execute escape in the face of certain doom, it would be the Templars. The tales that would later emerge, of knights fleeing under cover of darkness, of treasures secreted away into the wilderness, and of knowledge carried far beyond the borders of Europe, cannot be entirely dismissed as legend. Indeed, it is these very stories that hint at the possibility of an extraordinary journey to lands no chronicler of the time would ever record. Even as the Templar order crumbled under the weight of royal power and ecclesiastical condemnation, the echoes of their influence persisted. Some knights went into exile, vanishing into the hinterlands of Europe, the forests of Iberia, and, according to some rumors, even across the seas. They carried with them not only wealth and relics but also an unwavering commitment to a purpose that could not be revealed, a secret that demanded preservation at any cost. Here lies the subtle tragedy of the Templar fall. Their public demise was absolute, yet their private mission may have continued, hidden from view, scattered across lands that were, at the time, only beginning to be imagined. The human stories of that night are haunting. Fathers, sons, and brothers were torn from their homes, their vows of brotherhood shattered by the machinations of those who feared them. Knights who had spent decades in the Holy Land, who had witnessed death and destruction with composure, now faced an enemy they could not fight, betrayal by the very society they sought to protect. The despair must have been overwhelming, the weight of injustice, the fear of torture, the sense of being erased from memory forever. And yet, even in despair, there was resilience. Some found ways to communicate in secret, to protect what they could, to ensure that not all would be lost to history. It is impossible to overstate the magnitude of what was lost in those years. Libraries of knowledge, sacred relics, maps of distant lands, and secrets of faith and strategy may have vanished, destroyed, or hidden beyond reach. Yet the very act of erasure, the attempt to obliterate the Templars from memory, also fueled the fire of legend. Every document lost, every fortress abandoned, every knight who vanished became a thread in a story that would echo through the centuries. The fall of the Templars was not merely political. It was existential, a collision of ambition, fear, and devotion that left scars both tangible and intangible across Europe. And it is within this collision that the question arises: what did the Templars take with them when the world sought to destroy them? Was it gold alone? Or were there things far more valuable: knowledge, artifacts, secrets so potent that the survival of their order depended on hiding them from kings, popes, and inquisitors? Scholars, historians, and enthusiasts have speculated for centuries, yet the truth remains tantalizingly out of reach. Some of the surviving knights may have retreated to remote fortresses, some may have taken to the seas, and some, perhaps, ventured even farther, to places uncharted and unclaimed, where no authority could touch them. Could the icy desolation of Antarctica, so distant and unimaginable at the time, have been among the destinations considered for hiding what could not survive in the known world? The fall of the Templars is often recounted as a story of treachery and power, yet beneath the historical facts lies a human drama of unimaginable depth. Men of faith and discipline, men bound by brotherhood and purpose, faced annihilation not on the battlefield, but in the cold, methodical chambers of politics and betrayal. Their courage, their foresight, and perhaps even their desperation may have carried them beyond Europe, across seas and continents, in search of a refuge where their secrets could endure. The narrative of their collapse is thus inseparable from the narrative of their survival. A survival not of bodies alone, but of ideas, treasures, and a mission that refused to die. As we reflect on the night the Templars fell, it becomes clear that the story is far from over. The world saw their arrest, their trials, their suppression. But the deeper story, the story of what was hidden, what survived, and where it may now lie, is a mystery that transcends time and geography. And it is this mystery that draws us forward, toward the frozen expanses at the edge of the world, where the echoes of that fateful night may still linger beneath layers of ice, waiting for the moment when history and legend converge. The tension, the fear, the courage, and the secrets of that night echo across centuries, a haunting reminder that even the most powerful orders are vulnerable, and that what is most dangerous is not always visible. The Templars fell, yes, but in their fall lies the seed of one of the greatest mysteries ever imagined. The possibility that their story did not end in Europe, but continued far beyond, in a land where silence and ice preserved secrets longer than men ever could. Even as the Templars faced their greatest trial in Europe, whispers of distant lands and uncharted territories lingered in the minds of a few within their order. They were meticulous mapmakers, chroniclers, and navigators at a time when the world was still largely unknown. Their charts of the Mediterranean, the Levant, and parts of Europe were so precise that historians still marvel at their accuracy today. Yet some maps hinted at regions beyond the edges of the known world, places that were blank on other charts, denoted only by cryptic symbols, strange lines, or notes in coded languages. These were lands that most men would never see, let alone imagine, and yet the Templars seemed to regard them with a mix of curiosity, caution, and reverence. Could these be places they had already reached, or merely destinations they dreamed of reaching to safeguard what could not remain in Europe? The very act of charting the unknown was itself revolutionary. To create a map of untraveled lands required imagination, knowledge, and a certain audacity that few possessed. The Templars had all three. They studied the stars, the currents, and the behavior of winds with a precision that bordered on the mystical. They observed the sun and moon, tracked the movement of planets, and made notes of patterns invisible to casual observers. Every expedition, every voyage, every journey carried the potential not just for conquest but for knowledge. Maps of territories no one else had the foresight or courage to explore. Some of these maps, lost or hidden over centuries, were said to contain references to regions far to the south, areas of ice, snow, and rock that had yet to be discovered by humankind. It is here that legend and history begin to intertwine. In obscure manuscripts and codices, there are occasional references to a southern land, described with language that seems almost otherworldly. It is depicted as a place of extremes, where ice dominates the landscape, where winds howl across endless plains, and where no ordinary human could survive without preparation and purpose. Some scholars have dismissed these writings as allegorical, symbolic representations of spiritual journeys or moral tests. Yet others have noted that the descriptions are consistent, detailed, and precise enough to suggest a first-hand understanding of such a region. If even a fragment of this knowledge is accurate, it points to the extraordinary possibility that the Templars, or at least some of them, ventured far beyond the boundaries of medieval Europe in pursuit of secrecy, safety, and perhaps even survival. The question of why they would risk such a journey leads inevitably to the matter of what they carried with them. If their most valuable treasures, both material and intellectual, were threatened with seizure, destruction, or misuse, then Europe, with its kings and inquisitors, was no longer a safe repository. Gold could be taken, documents could be burned, and relics could be seized. But a distant, frozen land offered a kind of natural protection that no castle or vault in Europe could match. The ice itself would serve as a guardian, and the extreme conditions would deter the casual seeker. What might seem impossible in theory, traveling thousands of miles to a land unknown, becomes plausible when viewed through the lens of desperate preservation. There are tantalizing hints that the Templars' maps were more than geographic tools. Some contained coded symbols, hidden annotations, or strange geometric patterns that hinted at knowledge of currents, hidden passages, or even phenomena that would not be officially documented until centuries later. These were not ordinary charts. They were repositories of knowledge, guides for those initiated into the Order's deepest mysteries. It is here that the connection to faraway lands becomes more compelling. Could these maps have included references to a southern continent, one so remote and harsh that no European had dared to approach it? And if so, could a small group of Templars have actually traveled there, driven by necessity and the instinct to preserve what they knew must survive at all costs? The southern lands are, in many ways, the ultimate mystery. Unlike Europe, Asia, or Africa, these territories were beyond the scope of contemporary knowledge. Sailors and explorers of the time spoke of terra incognita, lands that were entirely uncharted and unknown. Legends of the era often depicted such places as realms of danger, inhabited by monstrous creatures or ruled by forces hostile to humankind. It would have been the perfect place to hide something the world was not yet ready to know. Treasures, knowledge, or objects imbued with sacred or strategic significance. The Templars, with their combination of courage, foresight, and meticulous planning, would have recognized the value of such a location, and some may have dared the journey that others could only dream of. The challenge of such a journey cannot be understated. Medieval navigation was fraught with danger. Storms, ice, treacherous coastlines, and uncharted waters could destroy even the most prepared expedition. Yet the Templars were not ordinary men. Their experience in the Mediterranean and the Levant, their discipline, and their understanding of logistics and survival gave them the tools to undertake extraordinary feats. Ships capable of long voyages, knowledge of currents and wind patterns, and the ability to live off the land or sea would have been essential. Every decision would have carried weight. One miscalculation could mean death or failure. And yet, for those carrying the most precious secrets of the Order, the risk may have been not only necessary but unavoidable. Evidence, while fragmentary, hints at extraordinary ambition. References in Templar codices to lands beyond the horizon, accounts of navigators who spoke of frozen coasts and endless ice, and later European explorers noting maps that predated known discoveries all converge to suggest a tantalizing possibility: that the Templars may have reached regions unknown to the world at large. Some modern historians speculate that these journeys were undertaken with the express purpose of establishing a hidden refuge, a sanctuary where knowledge, wealth, and sacred objects could survive untouched by human greed or fear. Whether or not they succeeded, the idea alone is enough to capture the imagination. A medieval order, long thought destroyed, traversing the unknown in the ultimate act of preservation. The interplay of map, legend, and ambition illustrates a deeper truth about the Templars. They were not merely men of war, or piety, or politics. They were visionaries, planners, and custodians of a legacy they believed transcended time. Their maps were more than tools. They were promises, guides to survival, keys to secrets that could alter the understanding of faith, history, or civilization itself. And while the historical record may not explicitly document journeys to the southern continent, the pattern of secrecy, ambition, and preservation makes the idea less implausible than one might assume. Every line drawn on a map, every cryptic annotation, every anomaly in Templar cartography becomes a clue, a whisper of intent, a suggestion of paths taken long before the world knew they existed. It is here that the mind begins to wander, imagining a small contingent of knights venturing southward, navigating unknown waters, driven by desperation and faith. They would have carried not only treasure and documents but also the weight of an order, a mission, and the understanding that failure could erase not just their lives but the memory of all they held sacred. And as the cold winds of Antarctica would later prove, there are places in the world where secrecy and preservation align, where the elements themselves can serve as guardians of what humanity cannot yet comprehend. Thus, the story of maps and the unknown is not merely about geography. It is about ambition, foresight, and the lengths to which men will go to protect what they value most. It is a bridge between the known world of Europe and the mysteries that lie far beyond, in a frozen expanse untouched by human hands. And it is this bridge, built of ink, courage, and secrecy, that may connect the Templars to one of the greatest mysteries ever imagined. A land at the bottom of the world, waiting in silence to reveal the legacy of those who dared to look beyond the horizon. The frozen expanse of Antarctica is a landscape unlike any other on Earth. It is vast, unyielding, and so inhospitable that the human presence there is fleeting, fragile, and entirely dependent on technology and planning. Yet beneath its sheets of ice, some of the most tantalizing mysteries of history may lie preserved, untouched by time and the greed of men. Modern explorers, driven by curiosity, science, and sometimes obsession, have long sought to understand this remote continent. Early expeditions in the 19th and 20th centuries returned with astonishing observations. Vast ice fields stretching beyond comprehension, mountains hidden beneath glaciers, and geological formations that hinted at a world far older and more complex than conventional history acknowledged. Amid these wonders were anomalies, objects, structures, and formations that seemed to defy explanation, as if the ice itself had preserved traces of a forgotten past. The first of these discoveries came not from treasure hunters, but from scientists and adventurers seeking to chart, measure, and understand. Surveyors, geologists, and explorers reported unusual rock formations and geometric alignments beneath the glaciers, features that appeared too deliberate to be entirely natural. In some cases, stone walls and terraces were partially exposed, jutting from the ice like the ruins of an ancient civilization. Instruments recorded patterns inconsistent with ordinary geological processes, and satellite imagery in later decades revealed shapes and structures that suggested human or humanoid intervention long before the continent had been formally explored. The question that arose again and again was impossible to answer definitively. Were these merely quirks of nature, or remnants of something intentional, something ancient, something deliberately hidden beneath the ice? Reports of strange artifacts began to surface, often buried in layers of ice or embedded in rock formations. Some were metallic, some stone, and others appeared to be crafted from materials that resisted decay despite the extreme cold. Explorers described objects with intricate designs, symbols, and engravings, many of which bore no immediate resemblance to known cultures. A few scholars speculated that these could be remnants of early expeditions, shipwrecks, or forgotten settlements, but others could not dismiss the possibility that they belonged to an even older, far more enigmatic civilization. The human mind, naturally drawn to pattern and meaning, could not help but ask, if these artifacts were human-made, who could have ventured to such a forbidding land centuries before it was officially discovered? Among the most mysterious finds were stones arranged in precise formations, visible only in certain light or from aerial perspectives. Some appeared to be walls, terraces, or even the foundations of larger structures, carefully constructed with an understanding of geometry and purpose. There were caves carved into the ice and rock, some large enough to have housed significant numbers of people, yet showing no signs of habitation by modern explorers. The anomalies were sporadic, inconsistent, and difficult to study, but their existence fueled speculation that Antarctica might have been visited, settled, or at least utilized in ways that defied conventional history. Could these be the remnants of a group fleeing Europe centuries ago, carrying knowledge and treasure too precious to be left behind? The very idea sent chills down the spines of both scientists and historians. Adding to the intrigue were accounts of unusual phenomena reported by early 20th century expeditions. Sailors spoke of strange lights flickering across the ice at night, sudden magnetic anomalies that disrupted compasses, and formations that seemed to shift or change depending on perspective. While many scientists attributed these observations to optical illusions, atmospheric conditions, or the psychological strain of isolation, others noted that the anomalies often coincided with the locations of the most unusual structures and artifacts. Some began to wonder if the land itself, shaped over millennia, might conceal purposeful design, something left behind by intelligent hands or preserved by forces we do not yet understand. The emotional resonance of these discoveries cannot be overstated. Imagine standing on a plateau of ice so vast it seems to swallow the horizon, holding an object partially encased in ice that has lain undisturbed for centuries. The cold bites at the skin, the wind screams across the plains, and yet there is an almost sacred weight to the moment. Every artifact, every anomaly, carries the possibility of connecting the present to the distant past, to a story that has long been hidden from history. It is a humbling experience, one that blends awe, fear, and wonder, and one that keeps the human mind striving to understand the unimaginable. One of the most compelling aspects of these discoveries is the suggestion of intentional concealment. Some artifacts appear to have been placed deliberately in locations that are extremely difficult to access, buried beneath meters of ice or tucked into glacial fissures. Structures and terraces align with celestial phenomena, hinting at knowledge of astronomy or navigation. There are symbols etched into stone that bear remarkable resemblance to esoteric markings associated with secret societies, religious orders, and even the Templars themselves. While definitive proof is elusive, the patterns are consistent enough to ignite speculation. Could these frozen relics be the work of a group intent on preserving something for future generations, something too dangerous, sacred, or valuable to remain in Europe? Explorers who have ventured into these regions often describe a sense of being watched, a feeling that the land itself remembers, that it is aware of the secrets it holds. Isolation in such extreme conditions magnifies every sound, every shadow, every gust of wind, creating an almost hallucinatory awareness of the environment. It is as if the ice has a consciousness of its own, guarding what lies beneath with patient vigilance. For those who believe in the Frozen Templar Mystery, this is not merely poetic imagery. It is a logical extension of the notion that some treasures, some knowledge, must be preserved under conditions so harsh that only the most determined and prepared could ever hope to uncover them. The human factor cannot be ignored. These discoveries spark obsession, a driving need to understand, to map, and to interpret. Teams of scientists, historians, and adventurers have dedicated years of their lives to studying the frozen continent, often at great personal risk. The emotional impact of finding a single anomalous artifact can be overwhelming. It represents not just a scientific breakthrough, but a connection to a story that transcends time, a tangible link to mysteries that may redefine our understanding of history. The knowledge that others may have walked these lands before, leaving behind relics of their presence, fuels the imagination and invites speculation that stretches from scholarly curiosity to the realm of legend. And yet, for all the discoveries, for all the anomalies, the Antarctic continent remains stubbornly silent. Ice covers stone, snow hides structures, and wind erases footprints as soon as they are made. Each expedition brings new insights but also new questions, creating a sense of perpetual pursuit. The more that is discovered, the more mysteries seem to emerge. It is a place where history and myth intersect, where the human desire for discovery collides with the sheer scale and indifference of nature. For those who seek the truth about the Templars and their possible southern refuge, Antarctica offers both hope and frustration. Hope in the form of tangible evidence, and frustration in the form of obstacles as vast and insurmountable as the ice itself. The frozen anomalies, strange artifacts, and geometric formations hint at something extraordinary, something that challenges the conventional timeline of human exploration. They suggest the possibility that a group with purpose, discipline, and foresight, perhaps even the Templars, may have reached these lands centuries before the modern world believed them accessible. The idea is both intoxicating and unsettling, blending historical inquiry with the thrill of discovery and the tension of the unknown. Each artifact carries the weight of centuries, each structure hints at deliberate planning, and each observation invites speculation about the courage and ingenuity of those who came before. In the end, the first modern discoveries in Antarctica do more than provide evidence of the continent's geological and ecological wonders. They open a window into a mystery that transcends human imagination. They force us to consider the lengths to which men might go to preserve what they hold sacred, the audacity required to traverse unknown lands, and the endurance needed to leave a mark upon a world that refuses to yield its secrets easily. The ice, silent and eternal, becomes both the keeper and the storyteller, preserving in its frozen embrace the remnants of a narrative that has waited patiently for centuries, whispering hints of a hidden history that continues to elude our understanding. Hidden deep within the vaults of European monasteries and cloisters are manuscripts that have fascinated scholars for centuries. Fragile pages of vellum, their edges worn by time, filled with cryptic symbols, coded language, and sketches that seem to resist conventional interpretation. Among these are the enigmatic codices associated with the Knights Templar, documents that hint at knowledge so profound and dangerous that it could not be openly shared. The texts are a mixture of practical instruction, esoteric philosophy, and deliberate secrecy, their meaning often layered beneath multiple levels of encryption. To the untrained eye, they might appear as religious meditation or architectural notes, but closer examination reveals subtle codes, references to distant lands, and a meticulous attention to detail that suggests the preservation of information meant for the initiated alone. The Templars were not merely knights. They were scholars, archivists, and custodians of knowledge. Their journeys to the Holy Land, their exposure to other cultures, and their connections to learned communities across Europe provided them access to manuscripts and traditions that few in medieval Europe could comprehend. They encountered ancient civilizations, studied their architecture, theology, and astronomy, and brought back ideas and insights that were carefully preserved within their order. Some of these texts contain detailed maps, precise measurements, and symbolic references to places and knowledge that seemed almost otherworldly. It is in these documents that the seeds of the Frozen Mystery may have first been planted, suggestions of lands beyond the known world, repositories of sacred knowledge, and instructions for preserving that knowledge in ways that could withstand the ravages of time and persecution. Deciphering these codices has challenged historians for centuries. Many of the manuscripts are written in cipher, with letters, numbers, and symbols arranged in ways that obscure the meaning from all but the most dedicated scholar. Marginalia and annotations, sometimes in different handwriting or language, add layers of complexity, hinting at commentary, correction, or secret explanation. Some passages seem deliberately misleading, a maze designed to frustrate the casual reader and protect the knowledge from falling into the wrong hands. The level of sophistication is astonishing, particularly for an era when literacy and numeracy were limited. This complexity fuels speculation that the Templars may have been safeguarding knowledge of immense value, knowledge that could alter the understanding of geography, faith, or even human capability. Among the most intriguing aspects of these codices are references to journeys and locations that do not appear on contemporary maps. There are descriptions of distant lands, harsh climates, and strange celestial phenomena, often recorded in symbolic or allegorical terms. Some researchers have suggested that these passages may refer to the southern continents, regions that were completely unknown to Europeans in the medieval period. Others argue that these references are spiritual metaphors, allegories for inner journeys of the soul. Yet the consistency and specificity of certain details, topographical markers, patterns in the stars, measurements that correspond to known geographical principles, have led some scholars to entertain the possibility that the Templars possessed knowledge of regions that lie far beyond the familiar lands of Europe, Asia, and Africa. The emotional resonance of handling one of these codices is difficult to convey. To touch a page that has survived centuries, to trace the careful strokes of ink that once conveyed instructions, guidance, or secret knowledge, is to connect with the minds of men long gone. One feels the weight of purpose, the urgency of preservation, and the quiet defiance of an order facing persecution yet determined to safeguard its legacy. Each symbol, each diagram, each coded passage carries with it the echoes of lives lived in devotion, danger, and secrecy. The codices are not merely historical artifacts. They are living conduits to a time when knowledge itself was a treasure more valuable than gold or land. Some codices contain intricate geometric designs that appear almost mathematical in nature, suggesting a level of sophistication in engineering, astronomy, or sacred architecture. Others depict symbols that bear resemblance to esoteric or religious iconography associated with secret societies, orders, or mystical traditions. These images have fueled speculation about the nature of the knowledge the Templars sought to protect. Was it purely spiritual, a deeper understanding of faith and divine order? Or did it encompass practical, worldly knowledge as well, instructions for navigation, construction, or survival in lands unknown to the rest of Europe. The ambiguity is deliberate, the message layered, the intent protective. Only those initiated, only those trusted, were meant to grasp the full scope of the wisdom contained within these fragile pages. The codices also hint at the movement of treasures and artifacts, objects of religious, strategic, or symbolic importance that required concealment from those who sought to destroy them. Some passages describe storage locations, methods of preservation, and travel routes designed to evade detection. It is here that the connection to remote lands becomes compelling. If knowledge and artifacts had to be removed from Europe to ensure their survival, the instructions encoded in these manuscripts may have served as a blueprint for a journey to regions uncharted and unclaimed. The level of detail, the precision of measurement, and the careful layering of information suggest that this was not speculation. It was a deliberate plan, a strategy for survival and secrecy that could extend far beyond the familiar boundaries of the medieval world. The human stakes embedded within these codices are profound. They speak not just of maps, treasures, or knowledge, but of loyalty, courage, and faith under duress. The knights who carried and studied these documents risked not only their lives but their very souls. They faced imprisonment, torture, and death for the protection of a legacy that was at once sacred and dangerous. The codices are a testament to resilience, a reminder that knowledge, when valued above mere survival, can drive men to extraordinary lengths. They are evidence of an order that understood that history itself could be fragile, and that what was recorded or hidden might define the future in ways unimaginable to those who wielded power in the present. Some of the most compelling codices have never been fully deciphered, their meaning locked away for reasons that remain elusive. Scholars and cryptographers continue to debate the significance of their symbols, the purpose of their diagrams, and the potential locations they describe. A handful of researchers have proposed that some passages point specifically to regions at the edge of the known world, lands that would have been inaccessible by conventional means in the medieval era. Could these texts have been guides for those fleeing persecution, a secret map for a southern sanctuary where knowledge and treasures could endure? The possibility, while speculative, is grounded in the patterns, precision, and extraordinary foresight that permeate these manuscripts. To read these codices is to step into a world where faith, intellect, and secrecy are inseparable. One begins to understand that the Templars were not merely warriors. They were visionaries, archivists, and strategists who balanced devotion with daring. They navigated not only the physical world but the world of ideas, knowledge, and power, leaving behind documents that encode wisdom, warnings, and instructions for survival. In these fragile pages lies the heartbeat of an order that, though publicly destroyed, may have continued its mission in ways that remain hidden from history. The codices are both record and prophecy, a silent testament to the lengths humans will go to protect what they believe is most sacred, even if it means vanishing into obscurity, into places no one else could ever follow. And so, the Templar codices serve as both key and mystery. They hint at journeys to unknown lands, at treasures preserved for the future, and at knowledge that could challenge conventional understanding of history, faith, and human capability. They are fragments of a story that stretches from the halls of medieval Europe to the icebound expanses of the southernmost continent, a bridge between legend and reality, secrecy and revelation. To engage with them is to confront the possibility that the Templars' true legacy lies not in the castles they built, the battles they fought, or the wealth they accumulated, but in the ideas, knowledge, and secrets they preserved in a world that has yet to fully comprehend them. The notion that the Templars could have ventured far beyond the familiar landscapes of medieval Europe seems almost unthinkable to the casual historian, yet fragments of evidence and whispered theories suggest that some may have looked south, toward lands uncharted, frozen, and remote. Long after their abrupt fall in the early 14th century, obscure manuscripts surfaced, often in the hands of collectors, monks, or obscure archives, that hinted at journeys to distant territories. The references were subtle, cryptic, sometimes hidden in allegory, and often embedded within codices that also contained religious or philosophical instruction. A few mentioned cold, desolate lands, described in language that suggested first-hand knowledge rather than speculation. These descriptions were not consistent with Europe or the Mediterranean. They evoked endless plains of ice, glaciers that swallowed the horizon, and mountains that pierced the sky like jagged teeth. For the scholars who stumbled upon these passages, a chilling possibility emerged. Could the Templars have sought refuge in lands no European had yet dared to explore? The earliest theorists linking the Templars to the Antarctic were not modern adventurers but scholars of the Renaissance and early modern periods, men who combed through the remnants of medieval libraries with painstaking care. They noted cryptic symbols in maps, references in letters, and diagrams in manuscripts that did not correspond to any known geography. Some of these scholars suggested that the Templars had knowledge of a southern landmass, a place that could serve as a sanctuary for treasures, knowledge, and sacred relics too dangerous to remain in Europe. Others argued that these references were spiritual allegories, symbolic journeys representing trials of faith, endurance, and moral virtue. Yet the sheer consistency of certain geographical descriptions, coupled with repeated references to extreme cold and isolation, suggested to a few that there was more than metaphor at work. In particular, a handful of obscure manuscripts describe journeys along icy coasts, the navigation of treacherous waters, and encounters with phenomena that would be familiar to anyone who has sailed near the Antarctic Circle. Sudden storms, floating ice, and vast, unbroken expanses of snow and ice. These passages are tantalizing in their specificity. They mention the difficulty of traveling in extreme cold, the need to preserve objects from frost, and the importance of careful planning in order to survive. While it is impossible to know if these accounts were literal or allegorical, they fuel speculation that some Templars may have considered, or even undertaken, voyages to regions far beyond the known world, seeking a refuge both physical and symbolic. The allure of such a southern refuge is easy to understand. After the arrests and purges orchestrated by Philip IV of France, the Templars had been scattered, hunted, and rendered vulnerable. Their treasures, their manuscripts, and their sacred relics could no longer remain in European strongholds without extreme risk of seizure or destruction. A distant, inhospitable land would have provided the perfect hiding place. Remote, uninhabitable by casual interlopers, and preserved by the natural cold of the environment itself. If any place on Earth could act as a vault for knowledge too dangerous to exist elsewhere, Antarctica would be an ideal candidate. The very climate that repels humans could also protect history, preserving it in ice for centuries, perhaps even a millennium. Some historians point to the enigmatic references in the so-called Southern Codices as further evidence of the Templars' ambitions. These texts, obscure and often fragmented, describe journeys across unknown seas, precise measurements of latitude that could not have been widely understood in the medieval period, and celestial observations that indicate sophisticated navigational knowledge. There are cryptic passages warning of treacherous currents, sudden storms, and the danger of losing what must be preserved at all costs. The meticulous nature of these instructions suggests preparation for long, hazardous journeys that could have taken the Templars far beyond Europe, perhaps to a land of ice and stone at the edge of the world. The idea is further supported by the practical needs of the Templars themselves. They were custodians of immense wealth: gold, silver, precious artifacts, and religious relics, some believed to hold divine significance. If this wealth could not remain safe in France or the Mediterranean, then its removal to a remote location would have been essential. The Templars were not reckless. They were planners, strategists, and men of exceptional discipline. To entrust such treasures to ordinary exile or secrecy within Europe would have been a mistake. Only a location beyond the reach of monarchs, inquisitors, and rival factions could serve their purpose. And what land in the medieval imagination would be both extreme and inaccessible enough to satisfy such requirements? The descriptions found in certain manuscripts point repeatedly to a land of ice, isolation, and enduring secrecy, a place that centuries later would come to be known as Antarctica. Even more compelling are the subtle hints that the Templars may have left markers for those who would follow. Some scholars point to recurring symbols and alignments in their codices and maps that do not correspond to any known European location but align surprisingly well with polar coordinates and patterns observable in the southern hemisphere. Whether this was deliberate guidance, a mnemonic for those initiated, or mere coincidence remains hotly debated. Yet the very fact that these patterns exist suggests intentionality, a desire to encode knowledge about regions far beyond the reach of their contemporaries. It is as though they foresaw that, one day, someone might need to rediscover what had been hidden, and the manuscripts would act as a silent guide, preserved through time and protected from casual eyes. The emotional undertone of these southern connections is profound. Imagine being a Templar knight in the early 1300s, witnessing the fall of the order, understanding that your sacred mission is under threat, and realizing that the survival of your knowledge and treasures depends on reaching a land no one else knows exists. The courage required for such a journey is staggering. To leave familiar shores, to navigate unknown seas, and to carry with you that which must endure beyond time itself is an act that blends desperation with faith, fear with resolve. It is a human drama as compelling as any battle, siege, or trial of the order. Yet it takes place far from the public eye, in silence, in shadow, in the imagination and daring of a few extraordinary individuals. Obscure accounts from later centuries reinforce the possibility. Early modern explorers, navigators, and geographers occasionally referenced maps and charts that appeared to originate from earlier unrecorded expeditions. Some maps included southern landmasses long before they were officially documented by European explorers. Some of these maps are thought to be copies, deliberately altered or encoded, suggesting that knowledge of the southern continent may have survived in secret, transmitted through generations, and preserved by those who understood its value. While the connection to the Templars is speculative, the consistency of the evidence invites serious consideration. The seeds of the Antarctic mystery may have been planted centuries before modern expeditions set foot on the ice. Ultimately, the early theories linking the Templars to Antarctica capture the imagination because they represent a convergence of history, legend, and possibility. They suggest that the fall of the order, rather than being a complete end, was part of a larger narrative, a story of preservation, foresight, and daring exploration. The manuscripts, maps, and codices are more than relics. They are breadcrumbs, left behind by an order that understood the stakes of history and sought to protect its legacy from annihilation. And as centuries passed, the frozen southern continent remained a silent guardian, waiting patiently for those willing to follow the trail, to question the orthodox narratives, and to confront the extraordinary possibility that a few knights, driven by desperation and devotion, may have reached the ends of the earth to safeguard a secret beyond imagination. Modern exploration of Antarctica began as a pursuit of science, ambition, and national pride, yet even the earliest expeditions hinted at something far more enigmatic beneath the ice. Sailors and explorers who braved the Southern Ocean often described phenomena that defied expectation. Mountains appearing where none should exist, ridges and formations that suggested intentional design, and strange shadows cast across the snow that could not easily be explained. These accounts, at first dismissed as optical illusions or the effects of fatigue and cold, became increasingly difficult to ignore as repeated expeditions documented the same anomalies. Ice, snow, and rock seemed to conceal deliberate patterns, almost as if the continent itself was a repository of hidden knowledge, waiting for discovery by those who dared to venture beyond the familiar. Early 20th century explorers returned with journals that hinted at the possibility of structures beneath the glaciers. Some recorded what appeared to be walls or terraces, geometric alignments visible only from elevated vantage points, and caves or tunnels carved into the ice and rock. Though rudimentary, these observations sparked speculation among historians and adventurers alike. How could these formations have occurred naturally in such a harsh environment? Could they be the work of a civilization lost to history, one with knowledge, purpose, and the resources to shape the frozen landscape? The questions were as compelling as they were frustrating, leaving a lingering sense of awe and unease. Artifacts found in these regions further deepen the mystery. Items encased in ice, some metallic, some stone, were discovered partially exposed along glacial edges. Their construction was deliberate, their designs intricate, and some bore symbols that bore an uncanny resemblance to markings associated with the Templars. Scholars have debated the significance of these discoveries, some suggesting they could have arrived through natural transport, others proposing they were remnants of later expeditions. Yet the sheer quantity and specificity of these anomalies point to a more intentional presence, a human hand shaping or preserving something in a land that would have been all but inaccessible in the medieval period. The alignment of certain formations is particularly striking. Lines of stone and ice correspond to celestial events, such as solstices and equinoxes, or follow geometric patterns that would have required sophisticated understanding of both mathematics and astronomy. These patterns are not consistent with random geological processes. The possibility arises that someone, somewhere, carefully planned and executed these arrangements. Who could have possessed the skill, the knowledge, and the motivation to do so in one of the most remote and inhospitable regions on Earth? For those who believe in the Templar connection, the answer seems almost preordained. An order that valued precision, secrecy, and foresight, willing to travel to extremes to protect knowledge and treasures of immeasurable importance. Even more curious are the anomalies found deep beneath the glaciers. Using modern technology such as ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery, scientists have identified cavities, tunnels, and irregular subglacial formations that defy easy explanation. Some are vast enough to suggest human or humanoid construction, while others resemble burial chambers or storage vaults, their purpose obscured by centuries of ice accumulation. These discoveries ignite the imagination. What could have been stored in such chambers? Relics of faith, documents of forbidden knowledge, or treasures meant to survive long after the collapse of civilizations above? Each discovery challenges the perception of Antarctica as a mere frozen wasteland and hints at a narrative of purpose, intent, and preservation that has yet to be fully understood. The psychological impact on explorers is another layer of intrigue. Many who have spent extended periods in the Antarctic describe an almost supernatural awareness of the environment. The isolation, the relentless cold, and the vast expanse of white can distort perception, magnifying shapes, shadows, and sounds into forms that seem meaningful. Some speak of feeling observed, as if the ice itself remembers. While this could be attributed to fatigue and the harsh conditions, the recurrence of these sensations among diverse expeditions raises the possibility that something more profound is at play. Perhaps the land itself holds memory, encoded in stone, ice, or arrangement, a silent witness to the actions of those who traversed it long before modern explorers arrived. The artifacts and formations also suggest deliberate concealment. Many items were found partially encased in ice, deliberately hidden or preserved to withstand the passage of time. The construction and placement of certain structures, combined with their alignment to celestial markers, imply that whoever built them had not only practical intent but spiritual or symbolic purpose. It is as if the creators understood the importance of endurance, knowing that only extreme conditions would preserve their work from human interference. For the Templars, whose fall in Europe had left treasures and knowledge vulnerable, the frozen southern continent would have represented the perfect vault, a place where ice and isolation could replace stone and walls as guardians against intrusion. Modern science has uncovered even stranger anomalies. Metallic objects buried beneath ice layers, unusual magnetic readings, and formations that appear to correspond to human architectural patterns, yet predate any known settlement. While skeptics argue that many of these findings can be explained by geological or glaciological processes, the coincidences are uncanny. Repeatedly, areas of anomalies correspond to patterns and symbols associated with secretive medieval orders, such as the Templars. Whether this is chance, misinterpretation, or evidence of extraordinary foresight remains a question that continues to drive research and speculation. Emotional responses to these discoveries cannot be overstated. To encounter a structure or artifact in Antarctica is to touch history in a way few other places on Earth allow. The cold, the wind, and the vastness amplify the sense of awe, creating moments that feel almost sacred. Each object, each anomaly, is a fragment of a story that defies conventional timelines, a whisper from a past that refuses to yield fully to modern understanding. The connection to the Templars, if more than coincidental, elevates these findings from the scientific to the almost mythical. An order long thought destroyed may have extended its reach to the very edges of the world, safeguarding what they could not leave behind in Europe. Even the failures of modern exploration add to the sense of mystery. Entire expeditions have vanished, research stations abandoned under strange circumstances, and anomalies remain unexplored due to extreme conditions. In some cases, Teams return with tantalizing photographs or radar readings that suggest vast structures hidden beneath thick ice sheets. Yet when revisited, many of these sites appear altered, buried, or erased by the relentless movement of glaciers. It is as if the continent itself refuses to give up its secrets easily, preserving its mysteries until those who seek them are prepared to understand their significance. The interplay of science, legend, and human curiosity creates a tension that is both thrilling and unsettling. Antarctica, in its frozen silence, challenges the notion of what we know about history, exploration, and human capability. Every artifact recovered, every anomaly documented, every formation studied is a testament to both the resilience of the natural world and the audacity of those who came before. For those who follow the trail of the Templars, these discoveries are more than coincidental. They are echoes of a calculated, deliberate presence, a connection between medieval ambition and the frozen expanse, hinting at a story that spans continents, centuries, and the limits of human imagination. Ultimately, the modern explorations of Antarctica reveal a land that is far from empty, far from inert, and far from mundane. Beneath its icy surface lie traces of human, or perhaps pre-human, intention, structures, and artifacts that challenge the imagination and demand inquiry. They hint at journeys undertaken, knowledge preserved, and secrets hidden from the world. And in considering these possibilities, one cannot help but feel a sense of awe, not only at the courage and ingenuity of those who may have come before, but at the vast, patient, and silent continent itself, guarding its mysteries in ice, waiting for those willing to listen, to interpret, and perhaps to uncover the frozen truths it holds. Even as the world above moved on, forgetting or suppressing the Templars and their deeds, whispers of a hidden inner circle persisted. Within the order, it is said, existed an elite faction, knights who were entrusted with the deepest secrets, knowledge so powerful that it could not be shared with even their own brethren indiscriminately. This inner circle, shrouded in layers of ritual and symbol, governed not just the distribution of wealth or the direction of armies, but the fate of knowledge itself. They were scholars, warriors, and custodians, individuals selected for their discipline, discretion, and capacity to bear the weight of responsibility that ordinary men could not endure. To belong to this group was both a privilege and a burden, an initiation into mysteries that could inspire awe or terror in equal measure. The secrecy of this faction was absolute. Records that survived the fall of the order hint at meetings conducted in subterranean chambers, behind hidden doors, or within fortified sanctuaries far from prying eyes. Initiation rituals were said to include symbolic tests of loyalty, courage, and obedience, each designed to ensure that those who joined the inner circle would never betray its purpose. Some scholars believe that these rituals also involved the transmission of knowledge in coded forms, allowing critical information to survive even if a member were captured or killed. The human stakes of such secrecy were immense. A misstep, a lapse of judgment, or a breach of trust could mean the loss of treasures, documents, or wisdom that had been safeguarded for generations. It was in this context that the idea of survival became paramount. When the Templars were systematically arrested and their order dismantled by Philip IV of France, the elite inner circle would have understood immediately that their mission was threatened. The outer world saw betrayal and destruction, but the inner circle perceived opportunity and necessity. To protect the order's most valuable possessions, texts, relics, maps, and knowledge, they needed to act decisively, to move beyond the familiar territories of Europe and into lands uncharted and inhospitable. This was not simply a flight for survival. It was a mission to preserve history itself, to ensure that knowledge and faith could endure beyond the reach of those who sought to obliterate them. Survival required both cunning and courage. Those tasked with safeguarding the Templars' deepest secrets could not rely on ordinary means. They moved under cover of darkness, traveled by obscure routes, and utilized ships and caravans to transport what could not be left behind. Accounts from later centuries, often fragmentary and anecdotal, suggest that some of these knights may have ventured far beyond the European continent, navigating seas and lands that few had charted or imagined. The distances were vast, the climates hostile, and the risks nearly insurmountable. Yet the inner circle was committed to a purpose greater than personal safety. They were bound not only by oath but by the conviction that some knowledge was too precious, too dangerous, and too sacred to be lost. The human dimension of these events cannot be understated. Men of remarkable skill and devotion faced the impossible. A collapsing order, enemies on every side, and the burden of knowledge that could not be shared. Many were captured or killed, yet those who survived did so with the quiet determination of individuals who understood that their actions might never be recorded in history, that their names might vanish even as the treasures they protected endured. Their courage was not the kind celebrated in songs or chronicles. It was the courage of secrecy, of patience, of knowing that the survival of knowledge required more than strength. It required endurance, discretion, and the willingness to vanish from the world entirely. Some legends suggest that these surviving members of the inner circle undertook journeys south, beyond the reach of inquisitors, monarchs, and even chroniclers. Their destination is never definitively recorded, yet hints in obscure manuscripts, symbolic diagrams, and encoded correspondence suggest an understanding of lands so distant and harsh that no ordinary European would have considered them. These passages speak of snow and ice, mountains that pierce the clouds, and seas that freeze with unimaginable ferocity. For the inner circle, such lands would have been ideal refuges, places where knowledge, wealth, and sacred objects could be preserved without interference, where the elements themselves could serve as guardians against human greed and ignorance. It is within these stories that the Antarctic connection begins to take shape. While concrete evidence is scarce, the logic is compelling. The inner circle's mission demanded secrecy and endurance. Europe had become a hostile environment. There existed a region of the world that was remote, uninhabitable by casual trespassers, and capable of preserving both material and intellectual treasures. The frozen southern continent, still largely invisible on medieval maps, fits these requirements precisely. To the Templars' inner circle, it may have represented not just refuge, but the ultimate vault, a place where history could survive, shielded by ice and isolation, awaiting a time when it could be rediscovered. The psychological and emotional weight of this mission must have been extraordinary. Knights of the inner circle were trained to bear physical hardship and danger, but this required more than strength. It demanded unyielding mental resilience. They faced the knowledge that discovery could mean death, that failure could erase centuries of careful preservation, and that the treasures and knowledge entrusted to them were more valuable than life itself. Imagine traveling through harsh climates, across unknown seas, and into a land so extreme that every step might be the last. The courage, ingenuity, and devotion required are almost unimaginable. Yet these men undertook it with a sense of purpose that transcends ordinary understanding. Even the smallest details of their planning suggest extraordinary foresight. Manuscripts hint at encoded instructions, hidden caches, and secret landmarks. Travel routes were carefully chosen, supplies meticulously prepared, and contingencies for survival mapped with precision. The inner circle understood that they were creating a legacy not only for themselves but for a world that might one day rediscover what they had preserved. The combination of secrecy, strategy, and endurance reflects a level of sophistication that makes their potential journey to the southern lands plausible, even if no direct record survives. The notion of a hidden inner circle also illuminates the broader human story of the Templars. These were men bound by loyalty, courage, and faith, navigating an existential threat. They were simultaneously warriors, scholars, and custodians of secrets too vast for ordinary understanding. Their mission combined elements of the physical, intellectual, and spiritual, demanding resilience and ingenuity at every turn. The inner circle exemplifies the human capacity to act under pressure, to balance secrecy with purpose, and to endure in the face of overwhelming odds. Their story is as much about the human spirit as it is about mystery, knowledge, or lost treasure. As the world moved on, forgetting the Templars and their deeds, the inner circle likely continued its mission in silence. Their actions would have left subtle traces. Anomalies in distant lands, encoded manuscripts, symbolic alignments, and perhaps even physical markers preserved by time and isolation. For historians and explorers today, these traces are tantalizing breadcrumbs, guiding the imagination toward a narrative that is both compelling and unsettling. It is a story of devotion, courage, and secrecy, suggesting that the Templars' influence extended far beyond the borders of Europe, into lands that remain largely unknown and inaccessible, yet potentially harboring evidence of one of history's greatest enigmas. Ultimately, the survival of the inner circle transforms the Templar narrative from one of defeat to one of enduring purpose. Even as Europe sought to erase them, even as their public identity was destroyed, a faction of the order may have continued to safeguard the knowledge, treasures, and secrets that could not survive in open view. Theirs was a mission conducted in shadows, in silence, and across distances that challenged imagination. It was a mission that may have led them to the ends of the earth, to icy landscapes where the elements themselves serve as guardians. And in considering this possibility, one is left with a profound sense of awe, that a group of men, bound by oath and purpose, could venture into the unknown, carrying with them the weight of history and the hope that some secrets were worth preserving beyond time itself. Beneath the vast, unbroken sheets of Antarctic ice, the notion of hidden vaults is almost irresistible. Modern exploration and scientific studies reveal an environment that is simultaneously hostile and preservative, a place where extreme cold, pressure, and isolation can maintain structures, objects, and perhaps even knowledge in a state untouched by human interference for centuries or millennia. It is easy to imagine that an order as meticulous and secretive as the Templars, understanding both the value of preservation and the dangers of exposure, might have recognized the continent not merely as a desolate wilderness but as the perfect natural vault. A place where ice could replace walls, and solitude could replace guards. A silent guardian preserving what the world above had declared lost or forbidden. The concept of these frozen vaults is not purely speculative. Subglacial lakes, caverns, and fissures have been discovered that could, theoretically, house extensive structures, untouched by the elements and shielded from detection. Some formations suggest deliberate construction. Terraces, straight lines, and patterns that align with celestial markers. While scientists typically attribute these features to geological processes, the possibility that they are the remnants of intentional design cannot be entirely dismissed. For those considering the Templars' potential movements, such locations would be ideal, allowing for storage, preservation, and concealment of items of extraordinary value. Texts, artifacts, religious relics, or knowledge that might alter the understanding of history, faith, or human achievement. Imagine the planning that would have gone into such an undertaking. A Templar inner circle fleeing persecution in Europe would have needed detailed knowledge of navigation, survival, and concealment. They would have required precise instruments, provisions capable of withstanding extreme cold, and methods for transporting objects through hostile terrain without detection. The icy landscape of Antarctica, with its hidden valleys, glacial caverns, and frozen lakes, could have provided both the opportunity and the challenge. These vaults, if they existed, would not have been merely storage spaces. They would have been carefully constructed sanctuaries, designed to endure centuries of isolation, preserving both the tangible and intangible legacies of an order intent on outlasting persecution and oblivion. Accounts of subglacial anomalies, while often debated and controversial, add a chilling layer of plausibility. Radar scans, satellite imagery, and ice-penetrating surveys have identified cavities, tunnels, and formations deep beneath the ice, some of which suggest shapes inconsistent with natural processes. While the scientific consensus often favors glacial activity or geological explanation, the presence of symmetrical patterns, enclosed spaces, and corridors hints at human, or at least purposeful, intervention. These discoveries provoke the imagination. Could these be remnants of frozen vaults, deliberately constructed by an order whose members understood the stakes of history and secrecy? Could the ice itself serve as both protector and time capsule, ensuring that whatever lay within would remain safe until the world was ready to rediscover it? The potential contents of such vaults invite even more speculation. Historical accounts and surviving Templar manuscripts suggest the order possessed relics, documents, and treasures of immense value. Sacred texts, perhaps containing knowledge considered dangerous or forbidden, could have been transported to these frozen chambers. Artifacts of religious significance, chalices, crosses, icons, or items associated with the Holy Land, might have been hidden where no one could seize or destroy them. Even practical knowledge, maps of unknown territories, and coded manuscripts could have been preserved, ensuring the continuity of wisdom that the outer world had sought to erase. The inner circle would have understood the stakes. The survival of these vaults was the survival of history, in a form protected from human interference and the ravages of time. The emotional resonance of imagining such vaults is profound. Consider the courage required to undertake such a journey. The knights would have faced months of treacherous travel across seas and icy expanses, knowing that failure meant not just death, but the possible destruction of everything they sought to protect. The psychological strain of isolation, the constant threat of exposure, and the enormity of responsibility must have weighed heavily on those chosen to safeguard the Order's most valuable secrets. Yet the Templars were trained for endurance, loyalty, and patience. The frozen continent, in its extreme silence, would have tested these qualities to the utmost, yet it would also have provided the perfect safeguard. A place so inhospitable that only the determined and prepared could reach it, ensuring that the legacy they carried would endure beyond time itself. Modern parallels further enhance the plausibility of these ideas. Scientists studying subglacial lakes, like Lake Vostok and Lake Ellsworth, have discovered ecosystems preserved under kilometers of ice, isolated from the surface for millions of years. Instruments detect strange formations, some geometrically regular, others anomalously smooth or reflective. These environments demonstrate the continent's extraordinary capacity to preserve fragile and ancient materials. If the Templars, or any order with similar foresight, had understood the principles of concealment, endurance, and environmental preservation, Antarctica could have served as the ultimate archive. Ice, in this sense, becomes both shield and witness, silently guarding the treasures of the past against intrusion, decay, and discovery. Some theories even suggest that these vaults were designed with celestial alignment in mind. Observers have noted that certain ice formations and subglacial corridors align with the solstice, equinox, or specific star positions. If intentional, this implies a level of sophistication and purpose that aligns with what is known of the Templar inner circle. Men capable of blending knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and sacred symbolism to preserve something beyond the ordinary. Aligning these vaults with the heavens may have been both symbolic and practical, providing orientation and a form of protection, linking the physical with the spiritual in a manner consistent with the Order's esoteric practices. The human stories intertwined with this concept are just as compelling as the physical evidence. Imagine the inner circle reaching these frozen vaults, carefully laying relics, manuscripts, and treasures into place, ensuring that each item is preserved and catalogued. The cold would bite, the wind would howl, and the silence would be absolute. Yet the sense of purpose would be immense. Each artifact hidden, each manuscript secured, each symbol etched into stone or ice represented an act of defiance, devotion, and foresight. These men were not merely preserving objects. They were preserving the essence of an order, its knowledge, and its mission, trusting that time and isolation would protect it until the world was ready to understand. Even if these vaults remain undiscovered, their hypothetical existence casts a long shadow over the Antarctic landscape. Every anomaly, every unusual formation, and every subglacial cavity invites speculation. Are these natural phenomena, or the remnants of an extraordinary effort to safeguard knowledge and treasures? The very idea challenges our understanding of human capability, ambition, and resilience. It suggests that the Templars, though persecuted and scattered, may have continued their mission in ways that transcend conventional history, leaving traces in the most extreme and unlikely of places. The frozen vaults of Antarctica, real or imagined, represent the intersection of human ingenuity, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of preservation. They embody a story of courage, loyalty, and secrecy. A story in which a group of men risked everything to protect knowledge and treasures that could not survive in the ordinary world. The continent itself becomes a character in this narrative, an indifferent yet faithful guardian, preserving history and mystery in its frozen embrace. And as modern explorers and scientists probe deeper, the possibility that these vaults exist, waiting patiently beneath ice and snow, continues to inspire awe, fear, and wonder in equal measure. In the early decades of the 20th century, The icy expanse of Antarctica attracted explorers driven by a mixture of scientific curiosity, national ambition, and the unquenchable human desire to confront the unknown. Ships braved storms that shredded sails. Crews endured temperatures so severe that frostbite and hypothermia were constant threats. And the winds howled like vengeful spirits across an endless white horizon. Amid this harsh theater of survival, some expeditions returned with the mundane: maps, meteorological observations, and specimens of ice and rock. But a few of these journeys yielded something far more unsettling: anomalies, unexplained artifacts, and, in one particularly chilling case, an expedition that vanished almost entirely, leaving behind only fragments of evidence and a legacy of whispered mystery. The expedition in question, organized by a private consortium of explorers and backed by a European research institute, set out with what appeared to be conventional objectives: to chart unknown territories, study glacial movement, and collect geological samples. The team comprised seasoned navigators, scientists, and a few men whose backgrounds were deliberately obscure, adding an air of secrecy to the venture. They departed in the dead of winter, navigating through ice-laden waters where the very sea seemed intent on swallowing the ship's whole. Early logs from the expedition indicated progress beyond expectation, with crew members noting formations and topography that were unlike anything they had encountered in previous Antarctic journeys. The excitement of discovery, however, was tinged with an underlying tension, as some of the terrain suggested structures or anomalies inconsistent with natural geology. As the expedition pressed further south, reports indicate that the crew began to experience inexplicable phenomena. Instruments malfunctioned inexplicably, compasses wavered, and previously reliable maps failed to correspond with observable landmarks. Some journals mention faint geometric patterns etched into glacial surfaces. Others describe stones arranged with apparent deliberation, and a few entries hint at objects half buried in the ice that resembled relics of human craft. While some modern scholars dismiss these accounts as exaggeration or the result of harsh conditions and mental strain, the consistency and specificity of the observations across multiple crew members suggest something far more profound. They had stumbled upon evidence of an intelligence that had preceded them, a presence deliberately hidden within the frozen landscape. The psychological toll on the team was immense. Days merged into nights in the unrelenting cold, visibility was often reduced to a few meters, and the monotony of white, punctuated only by jagged ice or distant peaks, weighed heavily on the human mind. Crew members reported hearing noises that seemed to emanate from beneath the ice: groaning, cracking, or faint metallic echoes. Some even spoke of feeling observed, as if invisible eyes tracked their movements across the frozen expanse. While these sensations could easily be attributed to isolation, fatigue, or hypothermic delirium, the repetition of such reports suggests that the land itself, or whatever lay beneath it, exerted an almost tangible presence. The most chilling aspect of this expedition, however, was the sudden disappearance of several members and the eventual disappearance of the entire team under mysterious circumstances. Initial communications ceased without explanation. Supply depots intended for resupply were found empty or disrupted, and the last logs indicate a growing sense of urgency and dread. Modern investigations, though hampered by the passage of time and the inaccessibility of the region, have revealed fragments of their journey: abandoned equipment, scattered journals, and footprints abruptly ending at the edge of crevasses or at the periphery of structures buried beneath ice. There is no definitive explanation for what happened, yet the cumulative evidence points to a combination of extreme environmental hazards and encounters with anomalies that were beyond comprehension. Some historians and researchers speculate that the expedition inadvertently came into contact with hidden structures or vaults, potentially aligned with the anomalies and artifacts noted in earlier discoveries. If such formations existed, they may have been deliberate repositories, carefully concealed to endure the centuries, and capable of provoking confusion or disorientation in those who encountered them without preparation. This aligns with previous hypotheses regarding the Templars' possible southern refuge. If an inner circle had indeed preserved knowledge or artifacts in Antarctica, modern explorers could unknowingly be navigating spaces designed to protect what lies within. The disappearance of the expedition raises the chilling possibility that the land, or the intelligence behind these vaults, was not merely passive but actively challenging intrusion, whether by design or circumstance. Even fragments of the expedition's findings suggest extraordinary implications. Journals note formations that could only have been built with intent, artifacts partially encased in ice that bear symbols of unknown origin, and structural anomalies that defy simple explanation. Some entries suggest a connection to ancient civilizations or orders of knowledge, referring to sacred halls beneath the ice or symbols of faith and guardianship discovered during brief, dangerous excursions. While these descriptions are fragmentary, they hint at a level of sophistication and purpose far beyond what the explorers had anticipated, suggesting that they had encountered remnants of a human or semi-human presence with intelligence, skill, and perhaps a centuries-long plan to safeguard secrets. The emotional dimension of these discoveries is profound. The surviving fragments convey a narrative of awe, fear, and an almost reverent recognition of the land's secrets. Crew members were not merely scientists or explorers. They were witnesses to something that transcended ordinary history, a frozen world that concealed both human ambition and the unknown. The fear they experienced was not simply a reaction to harsh conditions, but to the possibility that they had stumbled upon a story larger than themselves, one that had been carefully hidden for generations. To stand on the ice, confronted by structures or artifacts that defy explanation, is to confront a history that is invisible yet palpable, a narrative frozen in time and waiting to be deciphered. Speculation about the expedition's fate intertwines with the larger narrative of secret knowledge. Some suggest that the missing members may have discovered repositories deliberately designed to challenge or prevent intrusion. Others argue that the extreme conditions alone were sufficient to explain the losses, though the precise alignment of disappearances with anomalies suggests otherwise. There are whispers, almost folkloric in nature, of explorers finding passages or vaults that seem to shift or conceal themselves, vanishing beneath ice floes or shifting glaciers. While impossible to verify, these tales reinforce the idea that Antarctica is not merely a frozen wilderness but a landscape capable of preserving, and perhaps guarding, remnants of a human past that challenges conventional understanding. The connection to the Templars, while speculative, is undeniable in its intrigue. If an elite inner circle undertook voyages to remote southern lands to safeguard knowledge, relics, or treasures, modern expeditions may have unwittingly traced their path centuries later. The parallels between lost manuscripts, mysterious symbols, and anomalous structures suggest that the Templars' foresight, ingenuity, and determination could have left physical traces that endure even in the harshest environment on Earth. The vanished expedition becomes a bridge between centuries, a reminder that the mysteries of the frozen continent are not purely theoretical. They have tangible consequences for those who attempt to uncover them. Ultimately, this vanished expedition represents more than a historical footnote. It embodies the intersection of human ambition, endurance, and curiosity with the unknowable, extreme, and perhaps purposeful secrecy of Antarctica itself. It serves as a warning and an invitation. The continent conceals more than ice and rock. It holds traces of intention, intelligence, and history that may span centuries. For those following the trail of the Templars and their inner circle, the disappearance underscores the stakes, the dangers, and the magnitude of the mystery. It is a story that resonates with awe, fear, and fascination, reminding us that some secrets, frozen beneath ice and time, may demand more than courage. They may demand reverence, patience, and an understanding of history that is as deep as the glaciers themselves. Among the most compelling and perplexing discoveries in Antarctica are the strange symbols etched into ice, rock, and the occasional exposed relics, markings that seem to defy conventional explanation. Unlike the natural patterns of erosion, wind, or ice movement, these symbols exhibit deliberate geometry, precision, and repetition. Lines form angular shapes, spirals appear at exact intervals, and clusters of markings seem to correspond with celestial or topographical patterns. For modern explorers and researchers, encountering such symbols is disorienting. They suggest intelligence and intent, but the origin and purpose remain frustratingly elusive. Are these the handiwork of a forgotten civilization, a long-lost expedition, or, more tantalizingly, the marks of an ancient, secretive order such as the Templars? Some of these symbols bear a striking resemblance to known Templar iconography. Crosses, geometric patterns resembling the order seals, and symbolic arrangements that echo the architectural motifs of medieval European strongholds have been identified in several isolated locations. The precision of these etchings, coupled with their alignment to natural formations, has led some researchers to propose that they were not merely decorative but functional, serving as navigational markers, sacred symbols, or encoded messages. The possibility that these markings were created intentionally to guide or inform others of knowledge preserved beneath the ice adds a layer of mystery that is both haunting and captivating. The interpretation of these symbols is fraught with challenges. Many are partially obscured by centuries of ice accumulation, snow drifts, or glacial movement. Some appear to shift or disappear with the seasons, leaving researchers to wonder whether they were deliberately concealed or simply altered by natural forces. Others are located in extremely inhospitable regions, accessible only with specialized equipment and careful planning, suggesting that whoever created them intended them to remain hidden or at least difficult to approach. This selective placement reinforces the theory that they were not accidental or casual, but part of a larger system of communication or preservation. The emotional impact on those who encounter these symbols is significant. There is an undeniable sense of presence, as if the markings themselves are a whisper from the past, a message left by minds that understood the stakes of secrecy and endurance. Explorers describe an almost spiritual reaction, a mixture of awe and trepidation, as if the land itself recognizes the significance of what has been inscribed upon it. To trace a symbol with gloved fingers, to follow a series of etchings across an icy plateau, is to engage in a dialogue with history, with the possibility that these marks connect centuries, continents, and the intentions of men who faced persecution, exile, and the unknown. Some researchers have attempted to decode these symbols, drawing on historical manuscripts, Templar seals, and medieval cryptography. The results are inconclusive but suggestive. Patterns may indicate directions, celestial events, or instructions for locating objects buried beneath ice or hidden within crevasses. Other interpretations propose that the symbols encode philosophical or religious knowledge, ideas meant to guide the faithful or the initiated in ways that survive both time and adversity. The multiplicity of possibilities only deepens the mystery. Each symbol could carry layers of meaning, some practical, some spiritual, and some deliberately misleading, a safeguard against misinterpretation by the uninitiated. A particularly intriguing subset of these symbols appears to correspond with astronomical alignments. Observers have noted that certain etchings line up with the rising and setting of celestial bodies, the positions of constellations, and even polar phenomena such as auroras or solar angles during solstices. If intentional, these alignments suggest a sophisticated understanding of astronomy and navigation, knowledge that would have been exceptional even in Europe during the Templars' heyday. The implication is profound. Whoever created these symbols possessed not only technical skill but foresight, deliberately embedding markers that could guide future generations to knowledge or locations preserved in the harshest of environments. The geographic distribution of these symbols is also remarkable. They are found across vast distances, sometimes hundreds of kilometers apart, yet their recurring motifs suggest a coherent system or tradition. Some researchers posit that this system may have been a network of markers leading to significant locations, vaults, caves, or caches where treasures, manuscripts, or sacred artifacts were stored. The possibility that these marks represent a deliberate trail, spanning one of the most extreme and inaccessible landscapes on Earth, is both thrilling and terrifying. Following such a trail would require skill, courage, and an understanding of the symbolism encoded within, effectively creating a test of endurance, intellect, and perception for those who dared pursue it. The human element embedded within these symbols cannot be overlooked. Each etching, each spiral, each geometric shape is a testament to someone's intention, a decision to mark, to communicate, or to preserve. If the Templars were involved, the markings represent the culmination of centuries of experience in secrecy, discipline, and survival. They convey not only practical guidance but also philosophical and spiritual significance, a reflection of an order that understood the interplay between material, intellectual, and sacred realms. The act of creating such symbols in Antarctica, a land both hostile and uninhabitable, emphasizes the extraordinary foresight and courage required to ensure their endurance. Even today, these symbols provoke debate and speculation. Skeptics argue for natural explanations: wind-carved ice, glacial pressure, or coincidental patterns of rock formation. Yet the precision, alignment, and recurrence of motifs across isolated locations challenge these explanations. For those inclined toward historical and esoteric interpretation, the symbols offer tantalizing evidence of intentional preservation, a network of knowledge etched into the landscape by an order capable of extraordinary foresight and audacity. Whether navigational, spiritual, or symbolic, these markings serve as a silent testament to human ingenuity and the drive to safeguard knowledge against the ravages of time, nature, and political persecution. The convergence of natural preservation and deliberate human action elevates these symbols from curiosities to potential keys in a larger mystery. They hint at a narrative in which the Templars, or a surviving faction, extended their mission far beyond Europe, carrying their treasures, manuscripts, and sacred relics into a continent that could protect them. Each symbol may represent a chapter in a story frozen in ice, a story that transcends centuries, geography, and conventional historical understanding. They are not merely marks upon stone and ice. They are the language of secrecy, endurance, and human determination, waiting to be read by those capable of understanding the intentions embedded within. Ultimately, the symbols etched into Antarctica are both invitation and challenge. They invite explorers, scholars, and dreamers to question what is known about history, human capability, and the preservation of knowledge. They challenge us to consider that centuries-old secrets may endure in the most extreme environments, accessible only to those who approach with patience, insight, and respect. In this frozen landscape, the intersection of natural phenomena, human intent, and historical legacy creates a narrative that is simultaneously scientific, historical, and profoundly emotional. These symbols, silent and immutable, offer a glimpse into a past that is deliberately hidden, a mystery that continues to inspire awe, speculation, and the enduring belief that Antarctica, beneath its ice and snow, holds stories that may yet redefine our understanding of human history and ambition. The frozen expanses of Antarctica are not merely a canvas of white desolation. They are a repository of the unexpected, a place where the relentless cold preserves history in ways unimaginable to those who live beyond its reach. Among the most intriguing discoveries in these remote regions are artifacts partially encased in ice, preserved for centuries, their presence hinting at human activity far earlier and more deliberate than conventional history admits. These objects, crafted from metal, stone, and occasionally organic material, defy simple categorization. Some resemble tools or ceremonial items, others are unidentifiable, bearing markings or symbols that suggest a deliberate, almost sacred purpose. The preservation of these artifacts is remarkable. Frost and ice act as natural embalming agents, shielding them from decay, corrosion, and the wear of time. What makes these artifacts particularly compelling is their apparent intentionality. They are not randomly scattered or eroded remnants of casual human activity. They appear to have been placed with care, sometimes in clusters, sometimes aligned with natural formations, or positioned near unusual structures or caverns. Some are arranged in ways that echo architectural principles familiar to medieval Europe, while others bear symbols that suggest knowledge of geometry, astronomy, or esoteric tradition. The meticulous arrangement implies that those who left these items understood not only their material value, but also the symbolic and practical importance of preserving them. Every object becomes a message across time, a bridge between the vanished past and the present observer, whispering secrets that defy ordinary understanding. The possibility that these artifacts are linked to the Templars arises from both their sophistication and their context. The Templars were known not only as warriors but also as custodians of knowledge and relics. Their inner circle, tasked with safeguarding the Order's most valuable possessions, would have recognized the strategic advantage of preserving items in a location so inaccessible and extreme that they could not be seized, stolen, or destroyed. Antarctica, with its unyielding ice, treacherous terrain, and isolation, would have provided the perfect natural vault, a place where human curiosity alone would rarely suffice to uncover the treasures concealed within. For the Templars, survival of knowledge and artifacts was paramount, and the frozen continent may have represented the ultimate solution. The emotional impact of discovering such artifacts is profound. Explorers who have come across items partially encased in ice report a mixture of awe, fear, and reverence. To hold a centuries-old object that has survived extreme conditions evokes a sense of connection to those who placed it there, a tactile link to human endeavor across time and space. Every scratch, every engraving, every mark becomes a story, a testament to human ingenuity, patience, and purpose. The artifacts carry not only material weight, but also the intangible resonance of intention, courage, and belief, allowing modern observers to glimpse the priorities and convictions of those who lived centuries before them. Some artifacts are particularly enigmatic due to the symbols they bear. Certain items exhibit engravings resembling Templar crosses, geometric motifs, or coded inscriptions similar to those found in the Order's surviving codices. While it is impossible to confirm with absolute certainty that these artifacts were created or deposited by the Templars, the parallels are compelling. They suggest a continuity of purpose, the careful preservation of objects imbued with spiritual, intellectual, or practical significance. Whether these items were intended as religious relics, navigational tools, or encoded messages for future generations, their presence challenges conventional assumptions about human activity in Antarctica and raises the tantalizing possibility of an intentional, centuries-old campaign to safeguard knowledge in the most extreme environment on Earth. The placement of artifacts near natural formations adds another layer of intrigue. Many objects are found near caves, fissures, or unusual geological structures, suggesting that the creators understood the protective properties of the landscape. Ice itself can act as a preservative, but when combined with the shelter of rock formations, it becomes an almost perfect storage medium, shielding items from weathering, human interference, and the passage of centuries. Some researchers hypothesize that certain artifacts were deliberately aligned with celestial events, such as solstices, equinoxes, or the positions of stars and planets, echoing practices known in medieval Europe and suggesting a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. These considerations imply intentionality, precision, and foresight, reinforcing the notion that whoever deposited these objects recognized both the temporal and symbolic significance of their placement. The historical implications are staggering. If these artifacts are indeed linked to the Templars or a similar secretive group, they represent a continuity of human endeavor that bridges centuries, cultures, and continents. They challenge prevailing narratives about the reach and capabilities of medieval explorers, raising questions about the extent of their knowledge, the lengths they went to preserve their treasures, and the places they may have reached in the pursuit of secrecy and survival. The notion that men centuries ago could have undertaken journeys to one of the most extreme and inaccessible places on Earth, with the specific goal of safeguarding knowledge and artifacts, is both thrilling and humbling, expanding the imagination far beyond conventional history. Preservation is not limited to inorganic materials. Some organic artifacts, such as wooden implements, fabrics, or leather bindings, have been discovered partially preserved within ice. The extreme cold slows the decay process dramatically, effectively freezing these items in time. In some cases, the objects appear nearly intact, providing unprecedented insight into the techniques, craftsmanship, and materials used by their creators. The discovery of such items in conjunction with symbols, geometric alignments, or other artifacts suggests a cohesive effort, a deliberate act of safeguarding intended to endure the centuries and maintain continuity of purpose. It is an almost poetic testament to foresight, patience, and the human drive to protect what is valued most. Explorers often describe a profound sense of unease when encountering these artifacts. There is a feeling that the land itself is alive with memory, a quiet presence that observes, judges, and preserves. Every object encountered seems deliberate, as if intentionally left for discovery by those capable of understanding its significance. This emotional resonance heightens the sense of mystery, creating a narrative that extends beyond the physical into the psychological and spiritual realms. The artifacts are not merely historical objects. They are interlocutors, linking past, present, and future in a silent dialogue that only the patient, observant, and respectful can hope to comprehend. Some researchers speculate that these artifacts may be part of a broader network, potentially linked to the coded symbols etched in nearby rock and ice. The combination of physical objects and symbolic markings suggests an integrated system of communication and preservation, designed to transmit information across centuries and extreme distance. If this interpretation is correct, the artifacts are not isolated relics. They are nodes in a deliberate, multi-layered strategy to protect knowledge, relics, and history from destruction. The sophistication implied by such a network aligns with what is known of the Templar inner circle. Men capable of planning, encoding, and preserving secrets across time and space, aware that the world may seek to destroy them, yet determined to endure. Ultimately, the frozen artifacts of Antarctica evoke wonder, fear, and profound respect. They compel us to consider the extraordinary lengths to which humans will go to preserve what they deem sacred, important, or dangerous. They challenge assumptions about exploration, capability, and history, inviting speculation about long-lost journeys, hidden orders, and the secrets that endure beyond centuries and civilizations. For those who follow the thread of the Templars and their potential southern sanctuary, these artifacts are far more than curiosities. They are evidence, however tantalizing and incomplete, of a mission, a strategy, and a legacy that transcends time, geography, and the very ice that preserves it. There is a certain gravity in the concept of forbidden knowledge, a weight that extends far beyond simple secrecy. It is the kind of information that challenges perception, reshapes understanding, and, in the wrong hands, could be dangerous, destabilizing, or even catastrophic. The Knights Templar, with their meticulous record-keeping, guarded relics, and coded manuscripts, were intimately acquainted with this weight. While publicly known as warriors and protectors of pilgrims, there exists a tantalizing possibility that the inner circle of the order held knowledge that was deliberately concealed, not merely for protection of wealth, but for the safeguarding of truths that could alter the course of history or faith itself. The preservation of such knowledge would have been of paramount importance, particularly in a Europe that was both politically volatile and deeply suspicious of any power that seemed autonomous. The idea of forbidden knowledge takes on an almost cinematic quality when juxtaposed with the Antarctic landscape. Imagine an elite faction of knights, fleeing the persecution of Philip IV, navigating uncharted seas, and braving the most extreme climates on the planet. Each step would be calculated, each decision weighed, and each artifact or manuscript chosen with extraordinary care. It was not just survival they sought, it was preservation. To leave certain knowledge in Europe would have been to risk its destruction by fire, confiscation, or deliberate erasure. In this context, a remote, frozen continent becomes not merely a destination but a vault, a sanctuary where time itself could act as guardian, preserving the Order's most dangerous and profound secrets. What constituted forbidden knowledge is a matter of speculation, yet the codices and relics associated with the Templars offer tantalizing hints. Some manuscripts describe advanced astronomical observations, precise calculations, and geometric schematics that are remarkably sophisticated for the medieval period. Others hint at philosophical or spiritual principles, interpretations of sacred texts, or alternative cosmologies that could challenge orthodox religious understanding. There are references to relics imbued with extraordinary significance, artifacts that, in the eyes of the Order, must never be exposed to those unprepared or unworthy. The care with which these items were described and stored suggests that their value was measured not only materially, but metaphysically, intellectually, and spiritually. The emotional and psychological weight of safeguarding forbidden knowledge cannot be understated. Knights tasked with these responsibilities would have been acutely aware that any mistake, loss, misplacement, betrayal, could have consequences far greater than personal punishment. The stakes were existential. The survival of knowledge, the continuity of understanding, and the potential for future revelation were all in their hands. Each voyage into the unknown, each descent into glaciers and ice caves, and each carefully planned relocation of manuscripts and relics represented both courage and a profound moral responsibility. The men who undertook these actions were not merely preserving objects. They were preserving ideas, truths, and legacies that demanded endurance across centuries. The concept of forbidden knowledge also intersects with human ambition and curiosity. While much of what was hidden may have been religious, intellectual, or philosophical in nature, it is conceivable that some of it pertained to discoveries that could be applied in practical or strategic ways, knowledge of navigation, materials, or technologies unknown to the broader world. To the Templars, the value of this information would have been self-evident, and its preservation imperative. Europe, fractured and fraught with political intrigue, was ill-suited to safeguard such delicate and potent information. A frozen, remote land, accessible only to those prepared to endure its extremes, would have served as the perfect repository for that which could not survive in the ordinary world. The preservation of forbidden knowledge in Antarctica implies a sophisticated understanding of both human and natural challenges. Ice, snow, and subglacial environments provide unique protection against decay, tampering, and theft, but they also pose immense hazards to the preserver. The Templars, trained in resilience, discipline, and foresight, would have recognized these risks and planned accordingly. Knowledge and artifacts may have been stored in carefully chosen locations. Deep crevasses, caves carved into rock beneath ice, or subglacial chambers formed by natural processes yet supplemented with human engineering. Each site would need to balance accessibility with concealment, ensuring that the knowledge could endure without exposure while remaining retrievable by those who were entrusted with it. Modern parallels illuminate the effectiveness of such preservation. Subglacial lakes and frozen ecosystems, untouched by surface contamination, demonstrate that ice can act as a near-perfect preservative, maintaining delicate materials over extraordinary timescales. Organic matter, metal, parchment, and even fragile artifacts can survive centuries, their integrity maintained by sub-zero temperatures and isolation from atmospheric effects. The Antarctic environment, in essence, is a natural vault, capable of protecting knowledge and objects in a way that few constructed fortresses could rival. For an order acutely aware of the fragility of history and the destructive tendencies of power, such a place would have been ideal, a final sanctuary for that which could not survive elsewhere. The intersection of forbidden knowledge with Templar secrecy also introduces the possibility of encoded or layered information. Many manuscripts from the order are deliberately obfuscated, using ciphers, symbolic imagery, and allegorical writing to conceal the true meaning from the uninitiated. It is likely that the same principles were applied to physical artifacts, aligning symbols, placements, and celestial references to encode knowledge or convey instructions to those capable of interpreting them. This multi-layered approach reflects both intellectual sophistication and practical prudence. If the knowledge were discovered by the unworthy or unprepared, its meaning would remain hidden, even if the physical objects were encountered. The emotional and philosophical dimensions of forbidden knowledge add further depth. The Templars' mission was not merely to survive or to protect material treasures. It was to safeguard truth itself, in forms both tangible and intangible. This task required moral fortitude, courage, and patience. It required a willingness to journey into extremes, to confront death, isolation, and the unknown, all for the preservation of something greater than oneself. The inner circle, entrusted with this sacred duty, embodied a vision of responsibility that transcended immediate survival, linking the fate of centuries with their own courage and foresight. Speculative as it may be, the idea that forbidden knowledge was preserved in Antarctica resonates because it aligns with patterns observed in artifacts, symbols, and anomalies documented across the continent. Each discovery, from strange formations to subglacial anomalies, appears to suggest intention, purpose, and the preservation of secrets. The alignment of structures with celestial markers, the deliberate placement of artifacts, and the cryptic etchings all point toward a consistent narrative. Knowledge too dangerous to leave exposed was hidden in one of the harshest and most enduring environments on Earth, preserved against time, decay, and human interference. Ultimately, forbidden knowledge embodies the intersection of human ambition, faith, and foresight. It is at once a story of intellect and courage, of danger and preservation, of secrecy and revelation. If the Templars did indeed safeguard such knowledge in Antarctica, it represents a triumph not only of planning and courage but of imagination. The understanding that some truths are too precious to risk, yet too vital to let die. This legacy, frozen beneath ice and time, calls to the human desire for discovery, demanding patience, insight, and reverence. To contemplate it is to confront the possibility that some of the greatest secrets of our past are still waiting, preserved in silence, in a land that few will ever see, until the world is ready to understand what has been hidden for centuries. Betrayal is a wound that cuts deeper than the sharpest sword, and for the Knights Templar, betrayal came not on the battlefield, but from the very hands they had trusted. The arrest of the order in 1307 was not merely an act of political expediency. It was a meticulously orchestrated campaign of deceit, subterfuge, and calculated cruelty. Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, had long envied the Templars' wealth, influence, and autonomy. To him, their power represented a threat that could not be tolerated, and he moved with precision, ensuring that their fall would appear justifiable in the eyes of both the church and the public. Yet behind the veneer of legality and religious accusation lay a darker reality, a systematic dismantling of an order whose loyalty, skill, and foresight had long exceeded the comprehension of those in authority. For the knights themselves, the betrayal was immediate and overwhelming. Strongholds once thought impregnable fell to surprise raids in the dead of night. Members were seized from their beds, bound, and interrogated under accusations of heresy, blasphemy, and occult practices. Charges were fabricated, confessions extracted through torture, and reputations destroyed with meticulous care. The betrayal was not only political but deeply personal. Men who had dedicated their lives to faith, discipline, and service were now cast as criminals and conspirators. The psychological impact must have been staggering. These were warriors who had faced sieges, battlefields, and death without fear. Yet now they confronted a threat that could not be fought with sword or shield, a threat that undermined both identity and purpose. Amid this chaos, a subset of the order, the inner circle, recognized that survival depended not on resistance but on foresight, cunning, and speed. If the outer world sought to erase them entirely, then the preservation of their most valuable possessions, the knowledge, relics, and treasures they had safeguarded, would require decisive action. The betrayal of Europe became a catalyst for extraordinary planning, a flight into the unknown, a movement toward lands so distant and harsh that few could imagine them. For these men, betrayal was not an endpoint. It was a signal that their mission must continue, beyond the reach of kings, inquisitors, and historians alike. The logistics of such a flight are staggering to consider. Knights tasked with safeguarding relics and manuscripts would have needed to transport their cargo across hostile seas, treacherous terrain, and into regions that were effectively unknown to them. Every decision carried enormous risk. The wrong route, a miscalculation of supplies, or an encounter with hostile forces could mean the loss of lives, knowledge, and centuries of careful preservation. Yet the inner circle of the Templars was uniquely equipped for such an undertaking. Their experience in the Mediterranean, the Levant, and across Europe had honed their skills in navigation, strategy, and survival. They were disciplined, resourceful, and capable of enduring hardships that would have broken ordinary men. The betrayal of their homeland became both the impetus and the proving ground for a journey into the extreme. Human emotion was central to this flight. Fear, grief, and desperation were tempered by loyalty, courage, and devotion. Knights who had witnessed the collapse of their order, who had seen comrades arrested, tortured, or executed, now faced the daunting task of safeguarding knowledge that could not survive in Europe. Each artifact carried with it both material and symbolic weight. Sacred relics representing faith, manuscripts encoding knowledge that could shift understanding, and treasures that symbolized the order's authority and foresight. To lose these items would have been more than a material loss. It would have represented the annihilation of purpose, identity, and hope. For those entrusted with the inner circle's mission, the stakes were existential. The decision to flee southward, toward lands unknown and inhospitable, required vision beyond the ordinary. Europe, rife with enemies and eager for the Templars' destruction, could offer no sanctuary. Islands, forests, and distant territories were either occupied, mapped, or surveilled, leaving the extreme and uncharted as the only plausible refuge. Antarctica, though unimaginable in the medieval worldview, would have represented the ultimate sanctuary. A land of ice and isolation, where time itself acted as a preservative, where human intrusion was unlikely, and where the treasures they carried could remain untouched. The audacity of this choice underscores the extraordinary combination of courage, foresight, and desperation that characterized the Templars' inner circle. The journey itself would have tested every facet of human endurance. Ships navigating icy seas risked being trapped in frozen waters. Storms could obliterate vessels in minutes, and supplies could not be easily replenished. On land, temperatures plummeted to lethal extremes. Winds howled across featureless plains, and glaciers threatened to swallow even the most careful traveler. Every movement had to be calculated, every resting place chosen with foresight, every cache of provisions and artifacts protected against both the elements and potential human discovery. The betrayal in Europe had transformed the mission into a test not just of skill, but of endurance, resilience, and moral fortitude. The emotional tension of this journey must have been palpable. Knights who had spent lifetimes in service to an order now found themselves navigating the unknown, carrying the weight of centuries of faith and knowledge. The betrayal they had suffered would have fueled both fear and determination. Fear of loss, of death, of failure, and determination to honor their vows and preserve the legacy entrusted to them. In this crucible, human resilience was tested to its utmost limit, and the stakes could not have been higher. The survival of the Order's secrets depended on courage as much as skill, on foresight as much as strength, and on loyalty as much as resourcefulness. As they moved southward, the inner circle may have relied on encoded knowledge, maps, and celestial navigation. Manuscripts, codices, and relics preserved within their possession would have provided not just instructions but reassurance, continuity, and guidance. The flight from betrayal was not merely physical. It was intellectual, spiritual, and symbolic. Each decision, each step, each choice of hiding place for a relic or manuscript represented both the practical necessities of survival and the philosophical commitment to enduring beyond time. Antarctica, with its vast ice sheets, hidden valleys, and subglacial formations, may have become the ultimate destination, a place where both the material and intellectual treasures could endure, shielded by elements as harsh as the betrayal they had fled. The human drama of this escape resonates deeply because it is a story of extraordinary stakes and enduring loyalty. Betrayal could have ended the Templars' legacy in Europe, yet it became the catalyst for one of the most audacious survival missions imaginable. The Inner Circle's flight demonstrates the intersection of fear, courage, foresight, and devotion, illustrating a human capacity for endurance and ingenuity that transcends conventional understanding. It is a narrative in which betrayal is not an endpoint but a turning point, where adversity becomes the impetus for extraordinary acts of preservation, and where the stakes of history are carried across continents, ice, and time itself. Ultimately, the flight of the Templar Inner Circle transforms a narrative of betrayal into one of resilience and purpose. Their journey, whether mythic, historical, or somewhere in between, embodies the determination to preserve knowledge, artifacts, and faith against overwhelming odds. Antarctica, as the most extreme and enduring refuge on Earth, would have represented not merely a place of survival but a sanctuary for the very essence of the Order. In considering the betrayal, flight, and mission of these knights, one is confronted not only with a historical mystery but with a human story of courage, foresight, and the enduring desire to safeguard what is deemed too precious to be lost. The preparation for a journey into the unknown is as critical as the journey itself, and for the Templar Inner Circle, venturing toward a land as extreme and unforgiving as Antarctica would have demanded unprecedented foresight, ingenuity, and meticulous planning. The collapse of their order in Europe had left them not only hunted, but also burdened with treasures and knowledge whose preservation was paramount. Every decision, from the selection of routes to the management of provisions, from the concealment of relics to the timing of departure, had to be calculated with precision. This was not a conventional voyage. It was an expedition that required mastery of both human and environmental variables, an undertaking that combined survival, secrecy, and the safeguarding of history in a single, audacious plan. First and foremost, the Templars would have needed a method of transportation capable of enduring long, treacherous sea voyages. Ships had to be sturdy, reinforced against the crushing ice of the southern seas, yet nimble enough to navigate narrow channels and hidden passages. Every vessel would have carried not only the knights but also precious cargo, manuscripts, relics, and artifacts of immense spiritual, intellectual, and material value. Provisions had to be carefully rationed, taking into account both the length of the voyage and the extreme conditions anticipated upon arrival. Water, preserved food, medical supplies, and materials for shelter would have to be secured with a precision that left no margin for error. Any miscalculation could result in catastrophe, threatening the survival of both the individuals and the knowledge they carried. Navigation was another crucial element. The Templars were experienced travelers, having crossed seas and deserts, defended pilgrims, and mapped territories far beyond ordinary European comprehension. They were trained in celestial observation, understanding the stars, moon, and sun as guides for orientation. Yet Antarctica presented a unique challenge. Extreme latitudes, unpredictable magnetic anomalies, and months of darkness during winter. The inner circle would have had to rely on precise knowledge of navigation, potentially encoded within the manuscripts they carried, along with keen observation of celestial phenomena. Every bearing, every course correction, and every contingency plan had to account for the possibility of being blown off course into hostile and uncharted territory. The Templars were also masters of concealment and security. The artifacts and knowledge they carried were not merely valuable, they were dangerous in the wrong hands. The shipment of these items across treacherous seas demanded secrecy at every level. Routes were chosen to avoid detection, movements were likely coordinated to prevent observation by potential adversaries, and contingencies were prepared for encounters with hostile forces. The Knights understood that Europe's rulers and ecclesiastical authorities would leave no stone unturned in their pursuit of the Order's wealth and knowledge. Every measure of security, therefore, was a reflection of foresight born from experience, discipline, and the stark necessity of survival. Physical preparation was equally demanding. The Antarctic environment is one of the harshest on the planet, with temperatures plunging far below freezing, winds capable of stripping flesh from bone, and glaciers that conceal treacherous crevasses. Survival required both endurance and skill. Knights would have needed clothing capable of insulating against extreme cold, materials for shelter, and techniques for traversing ice fields and glaciers without succumbing to exposure or injury. The physical and psychological strain would have been immense. Months of isolation, the monotony of white landscapes, and the ever-present threat of death required not only courage but also unwavering discipline and mental fortitude. The selection and preparation of hidden repositories or vaults upon arrival were equally crucial. The Templars were meticulous planners, and any location chosen for storage had to balance concealment with stability. Crevasses, caves, and subglacial chambers would have provided natural protection, while the placement of artifacts could be further enhanced by constructing walls, terraces, or markers to ensure both accessibility and secrecy. Celestial alignments may have been considered to aid in orientation or to encode symbolic meaning, ensuring that the treasures, relics, and knowledge could endure for centuries, preserved not by human vigilance alone but by the unyielding permanence of ice, stone, and snow. The journey would also have required careful planning of contingencies. Antarctica is an environment of extremes, and the inner circle would have had to prepare for storms, shifting ice, treacherous currents, and the possibility of becoming stranded. Provisions, tools, and instructions had to be redundant, distributed in a manner that would allow survival even if part of the party was lost or equipment damaged. Knowledge itself was safeguarded not only by physical means but by encoding, redundancy, and careful record-keeping, ensuring that even if a single vessel or individual failed, the core mission of preservation could continue. Mental preparation was as vital as physical and logistical readiness. The journey south was not merely a physical undertaking but a psychological crucible. Isolation, monotony, and the enormity of the mission could fracture even the most disciplined minds. The Knights had to maintain cohesion, morale, and focus under circumstances that would have tested their faith, loyalty, and endurance. Each member of the inner circle bore the responsibility not just for themselves but for the survival of history, knowledge, and sacred relics. The psychological preparation involved training in patience, resilience, and the ability to act decisively under extreme stress, a reflection of the Order's broader philosophy that combined martial skill with spiritual discipline. The preparation for such a journey also highlights the Templars' mastery of foresight and strategy. They understood that the ultimate success of the mission depended on the interplay of numerous variables: weather, geography, navigation, concealment, endurance, and timing. Every element was interdependent. An error in one domain could cascade into failure in others. Yet the Templars were uniquely suited for this challenge. Trained in discipline, accustomed to planning military campaigns, and experienced in safeguarding treasures and knowledge under conditions of extreme risk, they possessed a rare combination of skills that made the unimaginable achievable. Finally, the preparation phase underscores the profound human drama inherent in this mission. The inner circle faced not only the physical dangers of the unknown but also the emotional weight of betrayal, loss, and responsibility. They were leaving behind everything familiar: homes, comrades, and centuries of stability, for a frozen unknown that offered both safety and extreme hazard. Each choice carried consequences that extended far beyond the immediate moment, impacting the survival of artifacts, manuscripts, and relics, and potentially altering the course of history itself. The preparation was thus not a mere logistical exercise. It was a moral and spiritual undertaking, a testament to the human capacity for courage, ingenuity, and foresight when confronted with existential stakes. In the end, the Templars' preparation for a journey to Antarctica reflects the extraordinary combination of intelligence, discipline, and determination that defined the order. They approached the unknown with a blend of pragmatism and foresight, balancing survival, secrecy, and preservation in a manner that few organizations, past or present, could emulate. Every ship reinforced, every course plotted, every artifact secured, and every member trained and prepared exemplifies a vision that is simultaneously human, strategic, and almost mythic in scope. It is in this preparation that the story of the Templars' flight, their survival, and their hidden legacy begins to take shape, bridging history, legend, and the frozen expanse of a continent that may yet hold their secrets. The arrival in Antarctica must have been both awe-inspiring and terrifying, a confrontation with a landscape unlike anything the Templars had ever encountered. Vast sheets of ice stretched beyond the horizon, punctuated by jagged mountains and hidden crevasses that threatened to swallow the unwary. The wind screamed across the barren plains, and the cold was absolute, a physical presence that gnawed at flesh, tested endurance, and demanded immediate adaptation. For the inner circle, every step carried the weight of history, the responsibility to preserve knowledge, and the knowledge that failure could mean the annihilation of centuries of carefully safeguarded relics and manuscripts. Antarctica was not merely a destination. It was a crucible, a land capable of destroying the unprepared, yet offering unparalleled protection to those capable of mastering its extremes. The first priority upon arrival would have been to establish shelter and secure the treasures they had transported from Europe. Caves, fissures, and natural overhangs would have offered immediate refuge, but long-term survival required innovation, fortitude, and the strategic selection of locations that balance concealment with accessibility. Ice caves, deep fissures, and subglacial chambers presented opportunities for natural protection while minimizing the risk of detection. The inner circle would have meticulously mapped these spaces, taking note of entrances, structural stability, and potential hazards. Every decision had to consider both human survival and the preservation of the precious cargo, ensuring that manuscripts, relics, and artifacts remained shielded from the elements. Construction of hidden vaults would have followed with careful precision. Ice and rock were not simply obstacles but materials to be used intelligently. Stones could be arranged to create walls or terraces, natural caverns could be expanded or reinforced, and ice could serve as both insulation and protection. Vaults were likely multi-layered, incorporating physical barriers, hidden entrances, and perhaps symbolic or coded markers to guide future visitors, or to signal the presence of something significant. The Templars' experience in fortification and architecture would have been invaluable, enabling them to construct structures capable of withstanding both environmental extremes and the passage of centuries. Each vault was not merely a storage space but a sanctuary, a time capsule designed to endure isolation and concealment with elegance and purpose. The placement of artifacts and manuscripts within these vaults required thought and foresight. Fragile documents would have been protected from moisture and temperature fluctuations, possibly stored in containers designed to resist decay. Sacred relics would have been positioned with reverence, perhaps aligned according to celestial principles or symbolic orientations, reflecting the Templars' esoteric understanding of geometry, astronomy, and sacred space. Items of practical use, tools, navigational instruments, or supplies would have been carefully catalogued and stored for future utility. Every arrangement reflects the Templars' discipline, a combination of practicality, spirituality, and meticulous preservation that underscores their commitment to enduring beyond the collapse of their order in Europe. Survival itself was an ongoing challenge. Extreme temperatures, fierce winds, and unpredictable weather demanded constant vigilance. The Templars would have needed strategies for heating, shelter, and food procurement, even if foraging was limited by the barren environment. Snow and ice could provide water, but only through careful management to prevent exhaustion and frostbite. Shelter construction had to balance durability with efficiency, allowing mobility while providing protection from storms that could strike with lethal suddenness. Every day was a test of human endurance, an exercise in discipline, ingenuity, and resilience, carried out with the knowledge that failure could erase both themselves and the precious knowledge they were tasked to protect. Isolation amplified the psychological strain of survival. In Europe, the Templars had been part of a larger network, their identity reinforced by order, community, and hierarchy. In Antarctica, they were removed from familiar structures, reliant only on each other and their skills. The monotony of white landscapes, the silence broken only by wind or distant ice movements, and the constant awareness of danger created conditions that tested mental fortitude. Leadership, morale, and cohesion were essential. The inner circle had to maintain focus, delegate responsibilities, and ensure that fear or despair did not compromise their mission. Survival depended not only on physical strength but also on the ability to sustain purpose, motivation, and discipline in the most extreme conditions imaginable. The first interactions with the environment would have required careful study. The Templars would have observed ice flow patterns, weather cycles, and natural hazards with meticulous attention, understanding that misjudgment could be fatal. Crevasses, hidden under deceptively smooth surfaces, demanded caution, while sudden ice falls and avalanches could alter terrain overnight. Glacial movements could both expose and conceal structures, requiring constant adaptation. Understanding and respecting the environment became part of the preservation strategy itself. To survive in Antarctica was to learn its rhythms, anticipate its dangers, and use its features to protect what they had brought with them. Strategic planning extended to long-term concealment. The Templars understood that they were not merely surviving. They were creating enduring sanctuaries for knowledge, artifacts, and relics. Entrances to vaults might be hidden beneath snow, reinforced by natural formations, or marked with symbols intelligible only to those trained in the Order's secret codes. Routes between settlements, storage areas, and observation points would have been planned to maximize safety and efficiency while minimizing exposure. This level of foresight reflects a combination of survival instinct, architectural skill, and esoteric knowledge, ensuring that the legacy they carried could withstand centuries of isolation. The emotional experience of the inner circle upon establishing a hidden presence in Antarctica would have been profound. Relief at surviving the voyage, combined with the awe-inspiring majesty and danger of the environment, created a complex mix of emotions: fear, reverence, hope, and the weight of responsibility. Every decision mattered, not only for survival but for the preservation of knowledge and artifacts whose value extended far beyond the individual. Each day reinforced the stakes. The continuation of the Order's mission depended on endurance, wisdom, and courage, traits that had been cultivated over decades of disciplined service. Even in the harshest conditions, the Templars would have recognized opportunities for further exploration and preservation. Natural formations could be repurposed, ice tunnels expanded, and strategic observation points established to monitor surrounding areas. Once the initial settlements and hidden vaults had been established, the challenge of long-term survival in Antarctica became paramount. The inner circle of the Templars had not merely arrived at their destination. They had to endure, adapt, and thrive in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Every aspect of daily life required meticulous planning, ingenuity, and constant vigilance. Food, water, and shelter were not simply necessities, but the pillars upon which the preservation of knowledge, relics, and sacred objects depended. The frozen landscape offered few comforts, yet it also provided security. Its isolation ensured that nothing and no one could threaten the sanctity of their mission. The Templars had entered a crucible that tested every skill, every decision, and every ounce of resilience they possessed. The logistics of sustenance were both complex and critical. Hunting or foraging opportunities were limited, forcing reliance on preserved provisions brought from Europe or meticulously crafted storage systems. Meat, grains, and preserved foods had to be rationed carefully, taking into account the extreme exertion required to navigate ice fields, construct shelters, and manage their treasures. Water was often derived from melting ice, a process that required constant attention to avoid contamination or waste. Every resource had to be accounted for, not only for immediate survival but for the long-term preservation of their mission. In this environment, mismanagement could have catastrophic consequences, threatening both life and legacy. Shelter was equally critical. Caves and ice fissures provided immediate protection, but long-term habitation demanded careful engineering. Ice walls could be reinforced, tunnels constructed, and snow strategically piled to shield living spaces from wind and avalanche. Shelters had to balance insulation with mobility, allowing the Knights to move between vaults, observation points, and supply caches with minimal risk. The architecture of survival became a delicate interplay between natural features and human ingenuity, reflecting the Templars' mastery of strategy, engineering, and adaptability. Every structure was both refuge and statement of intent, designed to endure, conceal, and safeguard. Daily routines in Antarctica required discipline and coordination. Tasks were divided among the group to maintain both survival and the mission's integrity. Some focused on tending to supplies, preserving food, and maintaining shelters, while others managed the storage and protection of manuscripts, relics, and artifacts. Observation posts were established to monitor weather, ice movement, and potential hazards. Patrols were necessary to check for crevasses, shifting glaciers, or other environmental dangers that could compromise vaults or living quarters. Every day was a test of endurance, intellect, and vigilance, a blend of survival, preservation, and quiet ritual. The mundane and the extraordinary existed side by side. Preparing a meal might take hours, yet in that same day, a knight might inspect a vault, decode symbols, or ensure that relics remained perfectly preserved in sub-zero conditions. Communication within the group had to be flawless. Isolation in such extreme conditions magnified any lapse in coordination. Misunderstandings or errors could result in loss of life or the compromise of the mission. The Templars' discipline and training ensured that each member understood their role, responsibilities, and contingencies. Signals, markers, and perhaps even coded inscriptions guided navigation between vaults and living spaces. Knowledge of the landscape, accumulated observation, and shared memory became vital tools, allowing the Knights to operate as a cohesive unit despite the isolation and dangers of the environment. One of the most extraordinary aspects of long-term survival in Antarctica was the integration of environmental observation into daily life. The Templars would have needed to track changes in ice movement, monitor weather patterns, and anticipate natural hazards. Understanding the rhythms of the land became as critical as the preservation of their treasures. Glaciers shifted, snow accumulated, and seasonal variations could expose or conceal important landmarks. The inner circle likely developed strategies to mitigate risk, mapping ice ridges, recording safe passages, and noting areas prone to sudden collapse. Survival depended on both respect for and mastery of the environment, a relationship that combined science, intuition, and centuries of accumulated knowledge. The preservation of artifacts and manuscripts was inseparable from survival. Vaults had to be monitored, climate conditions within storage areas maintained, and materials inspected for signs of deterioration. Knowledge was encoded and secured in layers of protection, Some manuscripts may have been stored in containers resistant to moisture, others hidden behind structural barriers or symbolic markers intelligible only to the initiated. The Templars' discipline ensured that the treasures they had brought from Europe remained intact, even as glaciers moved and the landscape shifted. The frozen continent itself became an ally, providing natural preservation, yet it demanded constant attention to ensure that the integrity of these vaults was not compromised. Social structure and mental resilience played an equally vital role. Isolation and harsh conditions could easily erode morale, yet the inner circle relied on rituals, discipline, and shared purpose to maintain cohesion. Religious observances, symbolic ceremonies, and even encoded exercises may have served to reinforce commitment, foster unity, and provide psychological stability. Every act, whether tending to supplies, guarding a vault, or recording observations, was imbued with significance. The Templars' understanding of loyalty, faith, and purpose allowed them to endure not only the physical but the mental and spiritual challenges of life in such an extreme environment. Navigation and mapping became continuous processes. Even after establishing vaults and shelters, the Templars would have needed to chart their surroundings, noting hazards, tracking ice shifts, and marking safe routes between sites. The placement of artifacts, symbolic markers, and encoded inscriptions required both spatial intelligence and foresight. These activities were not mere exercises in precision. They were survival strategies, ensuring that every part of the mission remained interconnected, resilient, and capable of enduring centuries of isolation. The landscape itself became a canvas for both utility and symbolic expression, with each action reflecting a deliberate blend of practicality and sacred purpose. Adaptation to environmental extremes was constant. Storms could strike without warning, blizzards could obscure visibility for days, and temperatures could plunge to lethal lows. The Templars would have relied on keen observation, collective experience, and disciplined protocols to respond to threats. Ice tunnels could be reinforced, provisions redistributed, and vaults monitored to prevent exposure to shifting ice. Every element of life in Antarctica demanded attention to detail, foresight, and flexibility, blending human ingenuity with the unforgiving reality of the environment. Ultimately, long-term survival in Antarctica was an interplay of endurance, discipline, and the safeguarding of history. The Templars had fled betrayal, crossed oceans, and endured unimaginable hardship to reach a continent where they could preserve knowledge, relics, and treasures beyond the reach of enemies or time. Daily life, far from mundane, became a continuous act of vigilance and devotion, a ritualized interaction with the environment, and a testament to human resilience. Through careful planning, observation, and disciplined practice, the inner circle transformed one of the harshest landscapes on Earth into a sanctuary, a living archive, and a hidden testament to the extraordinary lengths humanity can go to protect what it holds sacred. The construction and maintenance of hidden vaults in Antarctica represented the pinnacle of the Templars' ingenuity, discipline, and foresight. These were not ordinary shelters or storage spaces. They were carefully engineered sanctuaries designed to endure the extreme conditions of a frozen continent, protect invaluable relics and manuscripts, and preserve secrets that could reshape understanding of history and faith. Each vault had to balance multiple imperatives: concealment, durability, accessibility for the initiated, and alignment with symbolic or celestial markers that reflected the Order's esoteric knowledge. The very act of building these hidden repositories was a testament to human perseverance, strategic thinking, and the fusion of practicality with sacred purpose. Selecting locations for vaults required meticulous planning. Natural features, caves, fissures, and subglacial chambers provided ready-made protection, yet they had to be evaluated for stability, potential hazards, and proximity to resources. Crevasses that might collapse or shift over time were avoided, while terraces and rock formations that could reinforce walls were favored. The Templars would have assessed wind patterns, snow accumulation, and the risk of avalanches, ensuring that each vault could withstand decades, perhaps centuries, of environmental stress. Even slight miscalculations could result in catastrophic loss, making every decision a high-stakes exercise in precision and foresight. The engineering of these vaults demonstrates extraordinary skill. Ice and stone were not simply obstacles but materials to be manipulated intelligently. Walls could be reinforced with rocks or compacted snow, floors leveled with slabs or wooden structures, and entrances concealed to deter unwanted discovery. Some vaults may have been multi-chambered, with primary storage areas for relics and manuscripts, secondary spaces for tools or provisions, and hidden compartments accessible only to those who understood specific markers or symbols. The Templars' architectural expertise, honed in European castles, fortresses, and subterranean complexes, enabled them to adapt these principles to the frozen landscape, transforming natural features into enduring sanctuaries. Maintenance of the vaults was a constant, deliberate task. Ice shifts, temperature fluctuations, and snow accumulation could compromise structural integrity, while humidity and condensation threatened the preservation of manuscripts and relics. The Templars would have monitored conditions daily, shoring up walls, reinforcing entrances, and adjusting insulation to maintain optimal preservation. Even minor lapses could have long-term consequences, risking the loss of items transported from Europe at great peril. This ongoing care reflects the inner circle's commitment not only to survival but to the sacred responsibility of safeguarding knowledge and artifacts intended to endure beyond time. Alignment with celestial phenomena played a critical role in vault placement and construction. Observers have noted that many structures, both in the historical record and in modern anomalies, are oriented according to the solstice, equinox, or positions of stars and planets. In Antarctica, such alignments could serve multiple purposes: guiding navigation, marking the presence of hidden vaults, or embedding symbolic meaning into the landscape. The Templars' knowledge of astronomy and geometry, documented in surviving codices, suggests that they could have used celestial markers both practically and spiritually, creating a network of vaults that was navigable only to those trained in their esoteric methods. Each alignment represented a layer of intention, connecting the physical structures to a larger cosmological and symbolic framework. The use of coded markers and symbols further enhanced the security and secrecy of these vaults. Engravings in stone, subtle arrangements of rocks or ice, and symbolic patterns visible only from particular angles served as guides for the initiated, while remaining invisible or incomprehensible to outsiders. These markers may have indicated the presence of a vault, the location of a hidden chamber within it, or the instructions for accessing its contents. By combining physical concealment with symbolic encryption, the Templars created a system that ensured knowledge, relics, and treasures could survive centuries of neglect, natural processes, or human curiosity without being compromised. Daily life around the vaults integrated practical survival with ceremonial and strategic activity. Knights maintained and monitored the structures, ensuring that snow and ice did not compromise their integrity. Observatories or lookout points may have been established nearby to track environmental changes or detect potential intruders. Regular inspections, adjustments, and repairs would have been routine, yet every task carried layers of meaning. Each action reinforced the mission, the discipline, and the sacred responsibility to preserve knowledge against time and threat. In this way, the physical labor of maintenance became a form of ritual, intertwining human effort with devotion and purpose. The relationship between vaults, symbols, and artifacts created a coherent system that reflected both intelligence and intentionality. Artifacts were stored according to their function, significance, and potential risk, while manuscripts were encoded or layered with redundancy to protect their information. Celestial alignments, encoded symbols, and concealed entrances formed a network that was both practical and symbolic, ensuring that only those with understanding, training, and preparation could access the treasures within. This multi-layered approach underscores the Templars' foresight, demonstrating that they considered not only the immediate challenges of the environment, but also the long-term preservation of their mission, knowledge, and legacy. The human element in constructing and maintaining these vaults cannot be understated. Knights tasked with these responsibilities faced extreme cold, isolation, and constant risk. Each individual carried the weight of centuries of knowledge, the expectation of survival, and the responsibility for sacred relics and manuscripts. Cooperation, trust, and discipline were paramount. Every action, from reinforcing walls to cataloging artifacts, required skill, patience, and unwavering focus. In this environment, the inner circle's training, commitment, and sense of purpose were not abstract ideals. They were the difference between survival and failure, between preservation and loss. The emotional resonance of the vaults is profound. Standing within or near these carefully constructed spaces, one can imagine the tension, reverence, and devotion of the knights who built them. The ice and rock, combined with architectural ingenuity, symbolize endurance against time and adversity. Each vault represents a tangible manifestation of the Templars' foresight, courage, and dedication to a mission that extended far beyond personal survival. They are monuments to secrecy, endurance, and the human capacity to impose order and meaning on the most extreme and hostile of landscapes. In the broader narrative of Templar survival, the vaults serve as both literal and symbolic anchors. They are repositories of knowledge, faith, and human ingenuity, and their careful design and maintenance demonstrate an extraordinary understanding of environment, engineering, and secrecy. Through the combination of physical construction, celestial alignment, symbolic markers, and meticulous care, the Templars created a network that could endure centuries of ice, isolation, and human curiosity. In doing so, they transformed Antarctica from a frozen wilderness into a sanctuary, a living archive, and a testament to the lengths humans will go to preserve what they hold sacred. Ultimately, the hidden vaults of Antarctica illustrate the intersection of human intellect, spiritual devotion, and practical skill. They are more than repositories. They are enduring statements of purpose, reflecting a deliberate, patient, and audacious approach to the preservation of knowledge and legacy. In their construction, alignment, and maintenance, the Templars demonstrate foresight and resilience that transcends ordinary understanding, creating a narrative in which survival, secrecy, and sacred duty converge on the most extreme and unforgiving continent on Earth.